All right, and start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. And we're just gonna get right to it this week. Usually, I kind of do a leading off story. I mean, I guess I'll start with the five-goal thriller with Tottenham and Brighton, and then I think I'll switch it up. Normally, I do Arsenal, Liverpool, and Man City, and obviously we'll get to those. All three kind of had little scares this past weekend as we enter the international break. Liverpool are still top of the table, but they did suffer. They did suffer some boo boos from their win over Crystal Palace, and then Man City had a little bit of a scare versus Fulham. We'll get to that. Dahlan Traore was both Fulham's best player and Man City's best player in some respects. Ederson with some pretty nice saves, to be fair to him as well. That game really could have gone either way. And then Ramsdale returned to the Etihad Stadium with uh, uh, things on his mind to maybe get one little revenge on Arteta and Arsenal, and things were going okay in the second half, and then really Arsenal's quality did come through. They did struggle a bit, but it's second game in a row where they had 30 plus shots. Arsenal have been able to find a way. So far, and they've been dealing with some injury crashes. I mean, obviously, not having Odegaard is everything to this team. Now, Arteta has tried to change it up a little bit. We did see a bit of a shaked up lineup, so we'll get into that story as well. Man United coming into Sunday, we're basically in a must-win or a must-not-lose kind of game, and it looks like Ten Hag did just enough to keep his job. So we'll get a little bit into that. There's really wasn't a ton that happened in that game, maybe for Aston Villa's sake. A bit of a disappointment, but a nothing can attack or nothing can down their mood after a giant win in the midweek over Bayern Munich. Aston Villa in the Champions League, and we're beating Bayern Munich. That really is what it's all about for clubs like this. What an awesome moment that was for them, coming with another little a cameo off the bench for John Duran. It's getting to a point where you start to wonder, can how long can Emery not actually start starting John Duran? He came on again off the bench for Man United, though that time was one of the few times where we didn't see necessarily the magic. It was pretty cool to actually see. Emery try Watkins and Duran together. He's done that before, but it's sometimes usually it is like for like. One comes off, one comes on. Uh, Villa had some injury issues coming into the game, and then they ended up losing Konsa. I think that kind of played a little bit of a role. We didn't necessarily see a Villa team that was really that was taking really a ton of chances going forward. At least in that first half, did a little bit better in the second half. They started Jaden Philogene, a young wide player for them. He had his moments, but again, it's you can kind of blame it a little bit on you. So we'll get to that game as well, and then I'm kind of forgetting about really the highlight of I guess Saturday was the eight goal game with Brentford and Wolves. And I'll probably after I get with Tottenham and Brighton, I'll probably get to that game. And then we'll talk about a couple of the nil-nil fests. I already talked about the Man United one. We'll get to Everton and Newcastle, and really all the other stuff that happened. I think the other like kind of headline game was we finally have a promoted team that got their first win on the table, and it comes from the team that you were wondering would there be a hangover effect from losing to Arsenal in the manner that they did last last week, and lo and behold. No, Leicester are the first team to get off the blocks, and so we'll see if that creates others to follow, or not. It was one of those games where they get the early goal and they defended for their life. But a win is a win, and definitely, they need something to bounce back after a little bit of that kind of slight disappointment by having coming back from down 2 goals to get it to 2-2 with amazing kind of 2 goals from James Justin, your fullback, not really who you expect to get your goals, and then to just kind of lose it at the very end. So it was good to see them bounce back, and that is what you really do need to. So, anyways, getting started, we will start with Tottenham and Brighton again. 5 goal thriller. Another team that had a 2 goal lead, and that has started to be kind of a scary scary moment for a couple of these teams. First with Brennan Johnson, and the story would have been had Spurs won this game, uh, probably him. I think he would have like led maybe for the entire week. With the kind of run that he is on, he really is coming into himself after he's been scoring every game he's played in since that Arsenal game. So good to see for him. And then James Madison made it 2-0. Probably a little bit mistake by Verbreggen, but even before this, Tottenham were just abusing Brighton's back line a little bit. It didn't seem like Fabian Hortze had learned why Brighton were so exposed just a week ago versus Chelsea. Trying Lewis Dunk and Adam Webster again. And you can't necessarily say that he's been forced into this because Adam Webster actually got hurt like 9 minutes in. Igor Julio came on. And yes, I understand that, Brighton conceded the two goals after Igor Julio came on. But at the same time, you saw Brighton play differently in the second half, and I think the way that he was much more aggressive at kind of going into midfield and just kind of blocking off a little bit. He would pressure Kulishevsky when he was trying to get the ball. Brighton was significantly more aggressive on that, and then I thought Veltman was a little bit more aggressive in the second half on Werner because the first half really was either Werner, it was Kulishevsky, or Brendan Johnson. All of them were having fun running in behind, and it was just Tottenham could have been running roughshod. It could have been 3-0 easily. Actually, Brendan Johnson was in again in the late in the first half to make it 3-0, and one of the few times where he wasn't able to find the net, which was a bit of a surprise considering the form he was on. And then just all it took was just Brighton coming out. Now, the thing that's interesting is the coach did make a change, and you figured he's got to do something because this was not working out in the first half. And what he did was kind of cheeky. He looked at Kalidaglu, who is who is their left back, but he's right-footed, and he brought on Estupiñán. Now, Estupiñán has also played in some games, recently, and he's been hooked as well. So, it's not like Estupiñán is necessarily the best defensively. So it didn't feel like it was a defensive sub. But what it was is Estupiñán is left-footed, and you actually see all three goals come from Estupiñán getting on the ball and either in early phase buildup or even in kind of the final ball. Estupiñán played a giant role in that. It seemed like that freed up Matoma a little bit more to play a little bit more inside than necessarily hugging the wing. And really, you see it with and a couple of these as well. That just kind of at least evened out the game a little bit more. I thought Brighton were a little bit more aggressive at trying to win the ball back. I thought they were just they were moving it a little bit better as well. Uh, but it's still it required Spurs to contribute here, and I don't necessarily think I've seen some of the takes so far that people have been attacking the mentality. I guess they Ange doesn't coach defense enough, or whatever it is. I don't necessarily think Spurs were caught out, but by pressing high and just playing a high back line. For the mental goal, uh, Udogie is there, and he just he mishits a clearance. I think for the Jorginho Ruder goal, also Van de Ven and Udogie are both there, and they kind of basically run into each other. So I just think the defensive actions, with the players were in positions for all three of these goals. Even the Danny Welbeck goal for the third, there were no number of times where they could have stopped. I think it was Ruder that set up Welbeck. You could have stopped him. I think there's one. I think on that goal there were three Spurs players dressed all around Ruder, and he's still able to escape, and he's still able to beat. I think it's Betancourt to keep the ball in, and then he kind of gets a little lucky with the cross that finds an open Danny Welbeck, where you could have maybe go at Romero for not necessarily doing enough. So that's kind of where we're setting it up a little bit. Leading into this, Spurs were fresh off a pretty solid run of form coming into this big win at Old Trafford. Again, the Bruno red card maybe helped a little bit with that, but they were beating them even before that, and then shuffled up the squad a little bit in the Europa game, and they did concede a lot of chances. To be honest, in that game, but they were still able to win comfortably. And so you just figured they probably would continue this run of form, especially considering how Brighton looked just a week ago. And you see the lineup, and you're like, well, it should probably be the same because the same kind of lineup was pulled out by Fabian Hertzler, and then with Spurs who still have no Son, and so we see poor Romero, Van de Ven, Udogi, Kulishevsky, Betancourt, and Madison again. So we've seen that midfield kind of thrown out a few games in a row now, and I've spoken about that pretty much every single game week. I'm not necessarily a converter yet. You can see when Spurs have either full control of the game, or when Spurs maybe need to get a goal back, where they need to be like super creative, super attack minded. Maybe you understand this a little bit, but you don't have ball winners in this midfield here in Kulishevsky, Betancourt, and Madison. Both are very good on the ball. Obviously, both can create. Both can unlock things. Both it seems like Kulishevsky and Madison had free will whether or not to go forward, or maybe to go out wide to help with the wide players, with the front players. Uh, but I think in the second half you saw where that ended up kind of hurting a little bit, and I think Ange Postecoglou, if he did make a mistake, it was not changing that midfield probably after the first goal. Now the first goal happens really early in the second half, but at least when they went to 2-2. Maybe you could have brought in, Sar or Bet Basima, which is basically what he did do, but I think it happened after they went down. Uh, but yeah, it is kind of picking at straws a little bit. It's easy to do this, in hindsight. When it was happening in real time, it really didn't feel like this was going to be a Brighton coming from behind kind of game. And then the other thing to say is Brennan Johnson, Solanke, and Werner. One thing to talk about with Solanke is I think it was one of his more better games. He really is starting to come into his own form, and he doesn't necessarily score here, but he was quite good at setting up a couple of these goals. He's starting to it's Harry Kane like the way he's kind of dropping in a little bit and playmaking, but he's also got the legs to be upfield as well when they need someone to be in the box. But you look at Werner, and Werner's kind of the one you have to underline, unfortunately, because he was doing so well when he was able to get in behind Joey Veltman for Brighton. In the second half, Werner wasn't nearly as influential, and I just feel like the more Brighton had to take chances to come from behind, someone like Son, I think, would have put the game away. And it's just you don't necessarily want to go at Werner a little bit because it's unfortunate as well because he actually scores. He should have scored the first goal, and it was chalked off for an offsides in the build up. Werner had a pretty good game, but it's just it is on margins essentially, and I do think that ended up showing up, and so. And with Brighton, the thing to talk about was Webster and Dunk again, Kaladoglu instead of Estupian, which we'll get to. Joey Veltman, who wasn't able to play versus Chelsea. It was Kaladoglu tried on at right back, which he wasn't doing well versus Jadon Sancho. Joey Veltman was not doing well versus Warner, at least in the first half, and again, much better in the second half. But the midfield was interesting because it was Henselwood and Carlos Baliba. And I am surprised a little bit that we've seen Henselwood tried a little bit more in midfield to start the season than we have uh, uh, than one of the fullback spots where Brighton is relatively exposed at the moment. It's hard not to argue that, and it's not necessarily like Henselwood's necessarily done a bad job. I actually thought in the second half he was doing quite well defensively, but I just think it has been a bit surprising to see that. It seems like maybe that is going to be the pairing, not necessarily Matt Swifer or not Iori or someone else that might have possibly fit in that role instead. Then we see Minta basically getting a start over Adingra, and the Minta versus Adingra thing is kind of funny for Brighton's, and or Adingra can play on the left side or even the right side, and then we're seeing one thing that is kind of coming into that is kind of coming into shape here or form is this basically does feel to be for Rudder and Relbeck kind of the main two that Fabian Hortzler wants. He wants Welbeck to be his number 9 if fit. Now the problem is Welbeck is never always fit, and he seems to really want Ruder to be behind him. And Ruder is kind of a wild card in this because he is such a big body, but he's quite and he they're very both Welbeck and Ruder are very good out of possession. But Ruder is such a big body, and he's quite good with his feet. He's almost like a Joe Linton kind of player, but he's played a little bit as this number 10, and that is kind of what helps them get a couple of these goals. And then Matoma, again, Matoma is one of the more underrated wide players in the entire league, or maybe in all of Europe, frankly. And so the way that Brighton start, again, it's the high line, and it just feels like if there is I think I've talked about that before, if there is a bit of a ceiling to this team, I do think it's there. But it's looking rough. I mean, it was breached something like 5 times in the first 8 minutes, and then Adam Webster had to go off, injured, after he had just blocked a Madison shot. And then, Spurs do get another chance where Werner does score, but it is offsides. Kaladoglu here is kind of exposed. He's very aggressive, and Spurs do a really good job to get to a little flick to actually get Kulishevsky running in behind. Brandon Johnson shows with the ball, and then he does a little flick, and Kulishevsky is able to get in behind really easily, and then cross into the box. Werner's able to head it, but it was ruled offsides, and we do get a goal shortly after this. So Ruder loses the ball. I was talking up Ruder a little bit, but he does lose the ball here. He is better in the second half, and then so Udogie and Madison do a really good job to help pick basically double team him and pick him up. Magnuson then does a very good job to do a pass to find Solanke, who is found a little bit of pocket of space between Baliba and the two Brighton center backs. So that kind of is what I'm talking about. The Brighton center backs are so worried about those runs in behind. They're always hesitant. They're never really near the midfield there, and it's just you can either lay off or you can if you try to be aggressive. It's easy to get behind that way, but when you lay off, you're allowing a bit of a pocket of space for a kind of in tune striker to try to pop up and to have his back to goal to be an option in case you do lose the ball. And that's what happens here. And Solanke gets it and then does a very great little slip pass into Brennan Johnson, running it behind Igor and Kaladoglu. And Johnson then is able to find the finish to beat Verbreggen. And just the Kaladoglu, I do feel like he's exposed a little bit. I feel like he should do more here because he's getting beat. He was getting beat left and right by Johnson. It didn't feel like Kaladoglu could deal with Brendan Johnson's pace or physicality, and it feels like the coach kind of looked at Kaladoglu as kind of the weak point a little bit in that front team, and he was right in the end. But it was hard to really see that going in the beginning of the or at least in real time. I figured certainly changes have to be made. I wasn't really expecting that, but it was also kind of funny because Brendan Johnson is almost a rarity kind of a player where he is right footed and he's being played on the right and because you usually see the opposite. You usually see what the term is inverted, where you see left-footed players played on the right, and so it was a bit awkward a little bit for Kaladoglu. Maybe that was some of it as well. Then we have a couple of Brighton attacking moments before the second goal comes. Mitoma has a cross, nearly finds Danny Welbeck. So Brighton was still able to create some danger, and then Kaladoglu did have some nice crosses with his right foot. To Minta and Welbeck. So it was possible you could argue Spurs were maybe fortunate not to concede a couple of these crosses. Again, Ruder and Welbeck are both quite big bodies, and they can Ruder. I mentioned how Joe Linton is a bit of a profile. Maybe Adelaide Decore of Everton, the way that Brighton are using Ruder as a number 10, maybe fits that a little bit more as well because Ruder can get into the box and man, he's a handful. And they were kidding. They were creating some danger moments when Brighton were able to get forward and were able to get some crosses in. But the second goal does come right after that for Spurs, and it does come right after a decent Brighton attack. And so there's a goal kick. Pedro Porro gets on the ball, sees Brighton's back line, and is again laying off. They're playing deeper. So that was another thing the commentators were talking about is in the beginning, Brighton were trying to play a very high line, aggressive high line, kind of where almost the halfway line. And it was just so easy to get in behind. And so after it was a little bit of it coincided a little bit with with Dunk coming off and Igor Julio coming on. And the Brighton center backs were actually playing a little bit more kind of behind. They're playing I guess pragmatic or conservative, I guess you could say. But again, that creates a different problem as well. If you can get in, if the team isn't necessarily spaced together And the midfield again, Carlos Baliba is leaving too big of a gap between where the center backs were and basically where he was. And uh, Dominic Solanke is able to drop into that little pocket, and then he's able to turn, and then basically Timo Werner gets on his little bike, and he's able to get past Veltman. And so then after that, so Timo takes his time. He's able to see his options. He sees Madison kind of holding off his run in the penalty area, which is important as well. Brighton get some numbers back, uh, but because Timo Werner holds his run off, everyone's kind of ball watching a little bit. Madison's able to get the ball, and but then he's able to turn, and again, Dunk is too far away, and he can't really make up that ground to catch up. And Madison's able to curl run around Dunk, or before Dunk can get to him and get the block off. And Veltman possibly sees it late. And the commentators were kind of going at Verbruggen again. It possibly could have been saved. He does get a hand on it. I do feel it like maybe he does see it a little bit late. It's not like Madison, really caught this necessarily clean. It looks like he, maybe mishit it or was trying to do it outside. He's trying to curl it around. It wasn't really going for power. But it doesn't matter because it does go in, and there you go. It goes to 2-0, and it could have been 3-0. Again, with at the end of the half, you have Kaladoglu beaten for pace again. Solanke here, Spurs are building up, and Solanke is able to show for the ball near the halfway line. He does a nice little one-touch pass to find Kulishevsky, who's running off him. He's able to get in behind Henselwood, who didn't feel like he was helping much, offering much, help in that first half. It felt like Carlos Baliba was way too kind of isolated, in my opinion. I do feel like Henselwood was better, though, in the second half. But here, Kulishevsky's able to get in behind, and then was able to get the ball, and then he sees Brendan Johnson with Kaladoglu. Maybe Kaladoglu was just uh, wasn't really positioned right, and just one through ball, and it's a 1v1 kind of or 50-50 ball, and Brendan Johnson is able to win that sprint, and then Kaladoglu, he basically brushes off the Kaladoglu kind of challenge, and then Verbruggen does do enough to come out, and maybe he does make a bit of a save, but that easily could have gone in, and if it did, that probably would have killed the game off. And so it just felt like at halftime, it was more of a kind of feeling of Spurs are going to get that third and kill the game off. Brighton, neither fullback could handle either of the two Spurs wingers. And then again, the note I had was you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, with the way that you're playing the two center backs. Because they were trying to play slightly deeper, but that was creating that little gap that Solanke was living in, and that's why I talked about Solanke. Solanke had a really good game because it wasn't just doing that; he was pressing quite high when Spurs were trying, or when Brighton was trying to build from back. He basically a pest anytime that Brighton passed it back to Verbruggen, and Verbruggen's known for being quite good with his feet. Uh, so second half comes and we do get a bit of a change for Brighton, and so you figured this wasn't working, so something would have to change, and he does do Estupiñán for Kaladoglu, and we see immediate dividends from that. They get a goal in the basically 2 minutes into the second half, and it comes from that Estupiñán change. So his starting position, first off, is higher upfield. There's just a number of things that just Hortzler probably saw and was able to tell his team to change. So that was one. And then when Dunk gets the ball, he has time. So Brennan, funny enough, Spurs kind of laying off. They aren't necessarily pressing high. They aren't being super aggressive. So that's why I think the comments on why this happened, I do think we're a little bit off. Spurs were actually being a little bit more kind of pragmatic and laying off. And funny enough, it's possible that's actually what ends up hurting them a little bit, because here, when Dunk gets the ball, there's no one near him. Everyone's kind of, Brendan Johnson is kind of caught here having to deal with two guys. So he basically lays off. So Stupin gets the ball on the wing, and he basically, Pedro Porro then now has a problem. Does he run at Estupiñán, or does he have to try to stick with Matoma? And the reason why they do that is because of Christian Ramirez. So by just doing that little sequence of play to get Estupiñán the ball where he does, now you've given Spurs a bit of a problem. And then Estupiñán's able to play a ball to Matoma with his left foot. Matoma makes a run, and then Matoma just has an early cross into the box. And then again, Spurs probably should be able to deal with this. It goes past Van de Ven, but again, Udoki is right there as well, and just he has a mess of things. He tries to clear it, and it it bobbles on him, or he just mishits it, and then Minta is right there to pounce and he has a really nice finish to honestly make it to 2-1 because it would have been easy to maybe drag this wide because he takes it really fast. It could have been easy to hit this in the ground to scuff it or to drag it wide, and instead, no, he absolutely buries it and instant impact from the changes. And then we see other changes. So Igor's play in the second half. I have a note here. It's very noticeable how Igor Julio, the center back that has come on for Adam Webster, is being significantly more aggressive. He's running into midfield to cut out balls into Kulishevsky or Solanke. Spurs are not able to nearly find those pockets of space as easily as they were in the first half. He's also running out wide to cut out crosses to Brennan Johnson and Kulishevsky. And Igor Yulia was significantly better in the second half for Brighton, and I do think that helped them. To be honest, because you were able to stay the tide or whatever the saying would be. And then at the other end, Brighton started to create some chances. So we have in one for Matoma where Brighton are starting to win more midfield duels. Matoma is able to get free. He has a pop, forces a Vicario save. Uh, and as you're watching this, I do think it was surprising that Ange was sticking with his midfield because Betancourt is getting nowhere near the ball, and he's kind of get beat up a little bit. Kulishevsky and Madison again are trying to they're trying to show for the ball a little bit more, and it just feels like it's starting to the game's starting to get a little stretched, and that is not really what you want if you're a team that has the lead. Uh, and then Brighton and Reuter or Brighton's Reuter and Welbeck are quite big bodies, and they were helping out in some of those duels, and they were helping out in some of those pockets to link up, and they do get Brighton going. And then we do get the second goal in the 55th minute with Rudder. So Spurs again are laying off. Brighton's able to get it to Estupiñán, and who does a first time cross to pick out Matoma, who then finds a pocket between Betancourt and Romero, and then Matoma plays the ball to Jorginho Ritter here. He does it behind him. So this is clever by Matoma because if he plays it forward, I think Van de Ven's going to be able to get there. But he plays it behind Rudder, I think intentionally, and Van de Ven is kind of caught off a little bit. And then here, Udogi is wrong side of it, and they basically run into each other. They kind of collide into each other. And then Rudder's able to get the ball into his left feet and find the corner of the net. So it is a mistake a little bit by Van de Ven and Udogi. But I think before that, that first time ball by Estupiñán and then the collection by Matoma, because when Matoma collects it, he doesn't really have a whole lot of space, but because Betancourt is kind of there. So the note I have is this is kind of what world class is. That word does or phrase does get thrown out a little bit, but when players do not need a lot of space to fit a ball in, because it is an unbelievable ball by Estupiñán. This goal happens because of that ball that Estupiñán plays, and then the collection of Matoma as well. That is when you need to look at players' ability a little bit differently. And again, I do think the Spurs shape they got it wrong. They got a warning earlier, and they didn't shape up. So here, Brennan Johnson is targeted again. He's laying off a Stupien, and it's a simple ball for Lewis Dunk here. So there's no pressure on Lewis Dunk either. And at this point, Kulishevsky is actually there to cover Hintelwood, and I think Brennan Johnson is trying to kind of do what he did in the first half, or in this earlier in the first half or second half, when he was forced to mark two people. Here, Estupian should be Brennan Johnson's man. Uh, and I do think so. Brighton were doing a better job to go with that, and they were doing a better job to actually exploit Pedro Porro a little bit because they're forcing him to make a decision as well. Do you mark Matoma running to help Romero, or do you stick tighter with the Estupian? So it's just that kind of uh, being able to do that and to create some doubt was helping, and Spurs weren't quick enough to make their decisions. And then we have another moment where Welbeck receives the ball kind of near the halfway line and then carries it all the way up. He's able to create a chance for Matoma after bullying Romero. And then Menta fools Van de Ven with some clever feet, change of pace to get behind him. It creates a corner kick. And then we see the 3-2 comeback completed. So Dunk again, the supplier. Again, there's no pressure on Dunk when he gets the ball, and here it's on the other side of the field, and he just does a hopeful ball here. He just launches it long, and Menta is able to win the foot race to beat Udogi, and then Udogi does get back a little bit, but he miscontrols his touch and goes out of bounds. So it's a kind of a cheap throw in to give away. Still, there's no reason for this to be a danger moment. It's the ball throw in. Rudder gets the ball, and he does a kind of a turn to maybe he nutmegs Udogi, and then he basically runs to beat Betancourt. He goes to the ground and slides, and basically beats Betancourt trying to challenge, and basically the ball bounces off Betancourt, and that's what bounces it up. Uh, but I do think. And then basically Welbeck is there all alone. Romero had basically fallen asleep there. This is the goal where I think this was more kind of a misfortune than anything else. But if that's said, when Roto gets the ball, you could have thrown a blanket over him with the number of players that were there. There are like three, so it's spectacular control by Roto to beat kind of these three players because there's Betancourt there. I think there's Madison and Udoki, and it's just Roto's able to keep the ball, and he does a nice little kind of turn that's able to to beat them, and then he also is able to take a touch, and he's able to keep the ball in play, and then you have Welbeck's there to get on the end of it. So it's just Spurs. The game just it was as the saying goes, it was a tale of two halves. Spurs were able to do whatever they wanted in the first half. In the second half, they couldn't. They couldn't get in behind nearly as easily. Baliba, Dunk, Igor, and Estupian were there doing much better to be in possessions to stop those crosses. Maybe they were going into corner kicks, but Spurs weren't able to create much danger on the corner kicks or set pieces either. It felt like and then there was maybe a late chance for Udogi to kind of redeem himself, but Bregan did do better to get to dive on that, but he was able to see it coming all the way through. So the first half was about Brighton's fullbacks and center backs. Second half was really about Tottenham's Udogi and Van de Ven and Romero kind of getting caught there. And I don't think maybe I said getting caught. It's not really getting caught. It's being forced to do normal defensive actions that they I guess generally don't or aren't necessarily asked to do. A lot of the times, Spurs are trying to defend transition moments against them, and they're much better at closing those out. Here, it was more a case of Brighton kind of being in control and being forced to, if you handle this, it shouldn't be an issue. And just it was one of those games, really, just kind of fluky in that respect. Uh, and I do think Ange got a little bit comfortable playing Madison, Kulusevski, and Betancourt when he did. It is what it is. I mean, just stick with Brighton. A lot of positives with Rudder and Welbeck. They're starting to really kind of have a nice little relationship together. And just the only issue is, can you keep Welbeck going? You also see Brighton's depth is at least attacking depth is insane. They still have Sully Marsh to eventually come back into this. Maybe they'll actually try him as one of the fullbacks if they get to that. Simon Adingra hasn't been really used the last couple of weeks, and he can come on. We actually saw Julio Enciso come on in the second half for them as well. So Brighton have a lot of pieces there. Sometimes that can be good. Other times it can be a headache for a manager because you have so many players to think about. Matoma in the second half was unreal. He really was. He was giving them so many fits. Uh, and then Estupian coming on, that really did change it. The way that he was able to change how he was passing with his left foot really did undress Spurs in the way that they were trying to line up, as opposed to Kaladaglu, who will probably have his moments as well in other games. Those times when you want to play someone to maybe cut inside and to have some crosses in his right foot. Maybe you can. He was actually creating some pretty good moments when he was getting forward. It's just defensively, Brennan Johnson was owning him, and Estupian was just, you don't really remember Brennan Johnson or Kulusevski getting behind Estupian much. And when he did, there was, uh, Igor or Dunk to actually be in position to cut those out. And Igor and Dunk were much better second half for them. So I think, depending on what happens, or even not even with Adam Webster, I feel like that's probably your better lineup to go forward with. And then Carlos Baliba as well. Yeah, he continues to be a little bit uh, underrated, and just give him some help. I think, but when he's able to, he still is able to shine. Number of times when Spurs are a really good pressing team. Maybe, frankly, you could argue, at least stats suggest, they may be the best. at least high pressing and getting turnovers high in other teams' ends, and they were trying to. They were trying to get Brighton to make a mistake trying to pass that ball in the middle where Betancourt or Madison or someone would have been in there trying to get Brighton to make a mistake passing it into Believe. I believe was doing amazing at turning on the ball with people around him and being able to keep it. He was doing that a number of times as kind of a press with just kind of a leave to escape some of that pressure. So that is where we are for Brighton. Much better a way for them to bounce back and end going into the international break because they played better than what they showed versus Chelsea. I mean, the free kick goal was a I don't want to say a fluke because it's just you can't really necessarily look at that as being something that you can you just tip your hat basically to Palmer. Uh, they were defensively all over the place, despite how they actually didn't play that bad a game. That said, it was just so easy. It was so easy for Cole Palmer to get in behind. It was so easy for Madueke to get in behind. It was so easy for Jadon Sancho to beat Kaladaglu last week. Chelsea could have scored even more goals than they did. Uh, so it's a nice little bounce back for Brighton to come back, especially when you're down at your own end at your own ground and you're losing to so that nice little story for Fabian Hortzler, and I think he showed us some chops by making that change because that change with Stupian was really the change that won them the game and changed everything. And then you get the Spurs, uh, a bizarre game because considering how dominant they were in the first half. But the thing that's interesting is you get to the 78th minute and the announcer said that they had a shot on target outside of the second goal that they had. And so they weren't able to get Solanke going. They weren't able to get him free at all in the second half. And again, the Brighton fullbacks were much better at handling Johnson. And I thought Henselwood was doing a better job to just kind of stick with Kulishevsky a little bit. It just felt like Brighton figured out Spurs a little bit in that second half. And then defensively as well, it's not that they were cut open. It's just or they were exposed in a high line. It's just the lack of concentration when it came to having to do defensive actions. So uh, I mentioned already the lack of Sar, Basuma, possibly the lack of Son. Some positives. Solanke is actually coming into his own, and I think if you're a Tottenham fan, you can expect to maybe see a little bit more of him. At least we'll see how Ange kind of tries to play between him or Europa kind of games. We saw someone else like I think it was Lancashire tried in the midweek, but Solanke has a little bit more to his game than just being a number 9 to try to be in the box. He was doing kind of Harry Kane stuff where he was trying to drop into pockets, which was really good in the first half. In the second half, they weren't able to necessarily do that. Maybe he could have done better to try to run into channels. Maybe that could have given them some fits. He's still just joined them. We have to remember that. But a couple of games in a row where he actually has looked quite good for them, and then Brennan Johnson as well. And it kills the vibes that they didn't win because he would have been the story for the league with the run of form that he's in. As far as what maybe could Avange maybe done a little bit differently? I want to maybe not necessarily this game, but if Archie Gray has impressed in every Europa game that they played in. He is only 18. When do we start to see him kind of included a little bit more in the actual starting 11 or off the bench? This is a game when you kind of lost a little bit of the control in this game. What if he maybe done a little bit more? And not necessarily saying, play him at right back instead of Pedro Porro. That is kind of the other thing too. Udogi didn't seem to really kind of understand his role. Uh, Either sometimes he's forced to be playing out wide, but for more often than not, he's kind of being the one to play in midfield, and they're trying to invert him. I don't necessarily know if that's really best for his game. I think if you're going to play him forward, why don't you make him do overlaps? And I've kind of talked. I think I talked about that after the Arsenal game, and it seemed like they almost actually played him in midfield after Ange did make a number of changes in that second half when they took Timo Werner off. Uh, the other thing too is they were missing Son. We have to remember that. I do feel like Spurs would have been okay with a 2-goal lead had they you've been able to play with Son. So I want to see what the Spurs team looks like with Son back and with Solanke if they were able to kind of recreate a little of that Harry Kane and Son partnership. Who knows? But that is where we are for that game, and then we'll move to Brentford and Wolves. And again, as I mentioned, 8 goal thriller here, and see how we're doing for time. Actually, not bad at all. So really good. Yeah, 8 goal thriller here, and usually probably not what you expect with Brentford. Though they played their role in both offensive and defense, conceding 3 goals themselves. But yeah, Brentford with 5, with getting a goal from Collins. The crazy thing about this game is how it was kind of tit for tat. It got to 2-2, and then Brentford scored like 30 seconds after conceding the second goal, and then after that, really didn't look back. They were able to get a fourth with Pennick, just kind of a free header off a corner kick. Brentford nearly scored on a free header even before that, so they had the Wolves had the warning. I think if you're a Wolves fan, this is probably the most unnerving game that they've played so far, simply because Brentford were good. I'm not going to necessarily, to take anything away from them, but it's just the ease that Brentford were able to get free crosses off, and the ease that they were able to get really uncontested headers. The Wolves back line is got it's already got some injury issues. They lost Mascara. They gave away Max Kilman to start the season. They have a real big problem on their hands. And it's not just this. Last week versus Liverpool, they were playing really well, and then they conceded a goal through on one cross to Kanate into the box, and then Liverpool got the PK by not being able to handle a cross into Diego Jota. So Wolves have some issues, and I do feel a little bit for Gary O'Neill. I was worried about Wolves coming into the season, anyways. They've been playing better than their record shows. Here was the first time where I don't necessarily think it's really a case of tactics, or a case of O'Neal maybe playing bad tactics or a bad formation. Maybe you could see him change to maybe a back three, because that was what we saw last season. But the maybe he doesn't necessarily feel he has center backs to necessarily do that. I don't really know. You have Craig Dawson back there. He can be a good general, but he needs some help. Toddy Gomez was playing as like a third center back for the most part last season. Now he's being asked to kind of do a job. Next, he's almost like the Max Kilman kind of replacement. Or now that Mosquera is out, and he didn't feel comfortable to me defending crosses. And if you can get Craig Dawson a little bit preoccupied with someone else, it feels like they're going to concede a lot of goals. Another thing too is they don't have Jose Saw anymore. They brought in Sam Johnston, and Sam Johnson did make a couple of saves here and there, but I think he's kind of getting a little bit exposed on some of these as well. So yeah, this is nerving a little bit for Wolves, but for Brentford, this is as exciting as I think as Brentford fans have been. At least speaking to my buddy here, because we saw something entirely different from Thomas Frank that we just have not seen, and so I'll get to that as well. Uh, coming off, Brentford have the kind of leading story here was Brentford were coming into this like three games or 4 games in a row, going back to Man City, I believe, because it was Man City, Spurs, and maybe even I think it was West Ham, so it was 3 games in a row where they scored in the first opening minute of the game, and they didn't necessarily do it this time, but they basically did. They scored in the second minute here, and we'll get into a little bit why it's not a fluke. I'm going to say that if you do this 4 times in a row, there's no fluke or luck involved here. What they're doing is they're committing numbers forward. Really opening starts into the game. They're launching it forward, but they're committing numbers forward to handle those duels. And another thing too is in this case, Thomas Frank rolled out a really tall lineup. He played Vandenberger, Collins, Ethan Pennick, and Christian Ayer, who's like 6'7", and that's your back line. And so you don't. One thing you see here is you don't see fullbacks. All three, basically all four are center backs. Quite high or quite tall in height. I think Vandenberg's like 6'2". Collins is tall. Pennick, 6'4", 6'5". Ayer, like I said, 6'6", I believe. And then you've got Norgard back. And so you got Norgard and Janelt to kind of be your little protection. And by having that protection, Thomas Frank did something that, again, personally haven't seen him do with a Brentford side, at least since Christian Eriksen was in the team. he gave someone a kind of a number 10 little cam roll, and that was Damsgaard. And Damsgaard created so many looks by having this little roll. But then the other thing he did is, you've got Norgard or you've got Yen out, you've got some protection here. He allowed his fullbacks to get forward. And really, the only one that maybe didn't was Pennick. Pennick seemed like everyone else had license to, they got the ball. If there was space, you could carry it. And we saw Vandenberg carrying it. We saw Collins making forward runs and being into the box and being in the box, not on set pieces, like in open play. Ayer was doing the same. And then, the front lineup, you have Embremo Shada and Lewis Potter. You're doing this with a whole lot of injuries as well. You don't have Wiza. You don't have, the guy that was supposed to kind of replace Ivan Tony and Igor Tiago. And sometimes, Lewis Potter isn't always been, everyone's cup of tea as far as, playing forward, but he's had quite a few good games recently when he's been played kind of as a fullback. Here, he was played as one of those, front players, and he's got his confidence back, and he's looked very, very good for Brentford. He's able to take people on 1v1. He's got a great cross on him as well. He's able to create chances that way. And he's clever at being in the box and being able to make some runs as well. And then in Bremo, has kind of been given a different role week in and week out. He's still able to create with a couple of really good crosses as well. He's always going to be a threat when you come to being able to be reliable. To be someone, if you need someone to be on the wing, to be on the touchline, to escape pressure. If you need to go long, Brentford do like going long a lot. He's always there as well. And Shada is a different kind of player than maybe they've had with Tony or even with Wiza. Shada is looking to be a number 9 just in general. And so what that means is there is a gap a little bit now for a number 10 role if you're going to play this kind of way. And we saw that with Damsgaard. And Brentford were quite unbelievable with the number. I think they had some like 13 shots on target. Let's see what it actually ended up being full time. It was close to that. It was something like 9 big chances, I believe, as well. 19 shots and 12 on target. So I mean, the XG was over 4. 8 big chances. So not 9. I mean, Wolves had moments as well. 17 shots and I believe 6 on goal. So it wasn't wasn't the cleanest game in the world, but for Brentford fans, this was a lot of fun. It has had to be a lot of fun for them because one of the things that they've, at least my buddy has been worried about is, can you create an open play? And by giving Damsgaard this role, and Damsgaard is another player that Brentford have come in. They gave a shot on him when another other teams in Europe weren't doing weren't giving him that kind of taking on that risk. Apparently, he's been dealing with some kind of uh, bodily, some kind of maybe disease, or he something is has kind of halted his growth a little bit. But it's taken a while for him to even get some games for Brentford, but. He looks like he's kind of getting a little bit more his confidence back, and he's got some game to him, no doubt about that. And the other thing to say is, if he can't go, you brought in Fabio Carvalho of Liverpool, and he has been talking about for like 3 or 4 years now. He sees his best position as being a number 10. And so even if don't want to do Damsgaard here, you can play Fabio Carvalho there as well. So the reason why I'm kind of harping on this is we don't normally see this from Brentford. Playing with a number 10 kind of player, and lo and behold, they do that, and they get their best scoring output in a really long time, possibly ever, for Brentford being in the Premier League. So uh, we get to the first goal. So here it starts with the build up after like 90 seconds where both teams are playing kickball, which is kind of funny. Brentford are finally able to settle down and keep the ball on the ground a little bit in the progressive field. They do it with Sepp Vandenberg. He gets on the ball, and Wolves, no one really near him, and so go on and carry it upfield. He then plays it out wide to Damsgaard. Then Damsgaard quickly plays it to Embremo, again sitting on the wing, and then Damsgaard continues his run forwards. Embremo plays it, and then Damsgaard's able to cross it into the box, and it finds Collins, who continued his run forward as well. And again, Collins scores this, and is not from a set piece. So Brentford are just showing how they're getting numbers into the box. It starts with both kind of center backs, 2 center backs really getting on the ball and getting forward. For Wolves, this is too easy. It's just pass and go from Brentford. It's not really anything intricate. Uh, And just, Wolves not really, staying on a trailing runner, either Damsgaard or Collins. And it happens basically 3 minutes later as well, where there's another kind of free cross from that side. This time it's Lewis Potter, on the back post, and Potter connects on his header. But here it's, Sam Johnson's able to make a pretty good saves there. But that one also comes from Sanderberg, having some progressive carrying. To get Brentford upfield, and then Bremer is able to just kind of get a free cross off because Wolves can't get tight enough. And Tomato just completely misjudges the cross, and Lewis Potter is right there on mark. Possibly could have maybe even done a little bit better there, but it doesn't really go all of Brentford's favor. Wolves are able to get back into the game with Mateus Cunha. Forbes gets his first start for Wolves. I thought he was quite positive in the second half versus Liverpool as well. So he was able to here. He does well to get a dribble, to commit eyes on him, and then he slips in a really nice pass to Semedo, making a run, kind of an inside run ahead of him into the box, and then Semedo has a pullback cross that's able to find Cunha. Here, I don't really. I actually just tip my hat to Wolves kind of creating this, and Forbes specifically, because I think Lewis Potter is really concerned about Forbes' pace, taking on Ayer going 1v1 against him. So Lewis Potter is trying to kind of defend against that. And what happens is Forbes sees that, and he's able to thread a little ball in between before Lewis Potter is able to make up that gap. So yes, Semedo is able to run in behind. I think that it was supposed to be Lewis Potter's man, but I think he was more concerned a little bit with Forbes. But there was still a couple ways to stop that. Norgard basically dunks from the Cunha shot. Could have, that possibly could have been blocked. But either way, 1-1, new game. And then Brentford again do a good job of just progressing the ball upfield with ease. Here, Norgard's able to get it and carries it. And then he basically, when he's about to be met with Mario Lamena, he finds Damsgaard just wide open again, and then he plays it upfield to Lewis Potter upfield, and then just again with a few passes, Brentford are able to get a cheap corner kick, and then from here. They get a call to go their way because Mario Lamina is too handsy with with Nathan Collins, and there you go. PK given, and then Embremo from the clutch from the spot. Uh, I think the funny thing about there is it's maybe 2 for 2 now for Brian Embremo. And there was a lot of talk that when they lost Ivan Tony, who was going to be their PK taker, because Ivan Tony was so good at it, and it feels like Embremo maybe is going to be that same kind of reliability. Uh, he has a technique that's similar to like Jorginho or Bruno Fernandez when he does a little hop before doing a run up. But what he's also doing is he's looking at the keeper's eyes, and 2 for 2 with a little of that technique. So that's positive for Brentford as well. And then the other note I have is Nathan Collins has been a little bit of a revelation for Brentford to start the season. Made that big switch, funny enough, from Wolves. Last season, Brentford paid pretty big money for him, and I was one of the ones that was critical a little bit of that move because they did pay a lot of money for a center back that I just felt like you had Ben Mee. Eventually, you figured Ben Mee was going to return from injury. Yeah, I've always thought Nathan Collins was more kind of a center back than necessarily a fullback or wide player, but maybe not. Pennick as well. It was Pennick and Ben Mee, and then they went out and got Nathan Collins for a lot of money when it felt like they could have used that to boost up their midfield or boost up their attacking options. Uh, but he had a really good season for them the back half of last season, and he's had a very good start to his season here. And it is just kind of funny. He scores the opening goal here. He produces the PK with drawing that foul on Mario Lamena, and it's against his former club in Wolves. And you often do see that where players playing their former club do shell out a little bit. So I wanted to give a shout out up there. But we do get it to 2-2 with Lawson. And so what an opening half. So here Collins tries to clear a ball away, falls to Ait-Nouri instead. Ait-Nouri has a really nice cross into the box, finds Larson sticking out a leg in to deflect that, beating Ethan Pennick. And so 2-2, maybe Wolves are going to get back into the game. No, again, Wolves have been a gritty team. They haven't been a team that's really been beaten a lot outside of the Chelsea game. And unfortunately, we kind of did see a little bit of that again here. I mean, really 30 seconds later. So Brentford do well to win the ball off Wolves, very high in the Wolves' end, and then just a couple seconds later, after a kickoff, Brentford are just pushing bodies forward again, sending the ball long, just cause some chaos. Wolves can't deal with 50-50. the second ball is won by Brentford being able to keep pressure up. Shota shows for the ball, plays it outside to Imbremo, who squeezes the ball, squaring it to Janelt into the box. And then Janelt has the awareness to know where Norgard is. And he first times this into Norgard's path, and then 80 yards away from goal, Norgard's able to find the net. And it's fitting that Norgard scores this because they've missed him for a couple of games, and I've long said this that Brentford are a better team when Norgard's able to play. It just feels like everyone around him plays better. I've been really surprised that we haven't seen. Now he is 30, so maybe that's why. I've been a little bit surprised we haven't seen kind of upper teams try to pitch him off Brentford because he has been going back to when Brentford had a really good run of form with Christian Eriksen and Norgard and Janelt or Norgard and Jensen. It was almost like the Danish midfield. We're playing week in and week out. Norgard is the one that just kind of does stand out a little bit. He's quietly reliable at winning the ball back. He's quietly good in his duels. Now he is 30 years old, so maybe people don't like taking a flyer on someone that is a little bit older. He's not necessarily known for his pace and speed, but he's got always he understands how to play that role. Either with a pivot, with a partner, or someone forward. And here he's able to get a little forward and play a role in the attack, and he's able to have that finish. And so there you go. But it's another case of Wolves losing their marker in the box. I mean, Lamena is dragged upfield trying to win the ball off in Bremo, and he's not able to do it. No one's able to switch over in time because of that. No one marks Norgard just 8 yards from the goal. So uh, it, it, it's a case of Wolves being switched off, but it's also this only happens because it's one touch football here. It's quick. They're not taking their time. They're not trying to either draw things out or they're not trying to get into the speed of things. They know the passing pattern they want to do. They know the run that someone wants to make, and they know where their teammates are, and just without that one touch pass by Yano, this doesn't happen. And because it does, Thomas Frank said afterwards that he felt like this was kind of the sucker punch. This was like kind of the knockout blow, and he was probably right. Brentford nearly scored a fourth with Kevin Shota. Free cross again here. So Lewis Potter is found by Damsgaard, who again is just. I'm just loving how quick and incisive Brentford are at moving the ball here. It also is helped by Wolves just leaving space everywhere. Here there is a good Johnson save. It does create a corner kick though, and on that corner kick, Ethan Pinnock is wide open with a free header and just puts it over the bar. And then there's a minute later where they give up another cheap corner kick created by Lewis Potter and Damsgaard, quick doing a give and go with each other. And they get the corner kick there right before halftime, and Ethan Pinnock does score on that. So we're only at halftime, and we've had 6 goals. Uh, Brentford, I feel like we're probably disappointed to not get out more out of the games that they have played recently because they've scored. Yeah, the first goal and the opening goal in all 4 games that they've recently played, and they played really good in that first half for Man City. I think the thing to touch on here is they haven't had a full 90 minutes where they played their best football. A lot of it has been 60 minutes of really good stuff, and then kind of down or kind of at least 45 minutes here. So they were very poor for Spurs in the opening half, despite having that opening goal. In the second half, they were very good, good enough to actually get more out of that game than they did. They ended up losing. They were very good in that opening half, I thought, versus West Ham, but they just weren't able to get that second goal, and West Ham were able to. There was a shot at injury that maybe kind of changed things, and so they weren't able to really, in Man City as well. They forced Pep to actually bring on Rodri maybe earlier than he wanted. And Man City were much better in the second half. It could have been a lot. That was when Flecken had to make like 9 saves. So Brentford are starting to try to find their form a little bit. They hadn't really been rewarded for how they've been played. They finally get their rewards there. Finally starting to click a little bit. And again, Johnson had to make some saves. It could have even been 5 or 6. And so Wolves, this is worrying. Worrying for Gary O'Neill because this is not a Brentford team that has been high flying, you can say. And it was just too easy. Too many runs unmarked. Not really a whole lot of pressing that was creating turnovers. It was really easy for Brentford to create mismatches and numbers where they were outnumbering Wolves players. It was just it was a walk in the park in some respects. And defensively, anytime that there was a cross in, they had such an issue defending it. And so again, that loss of Mosquera, they only brought in, so he had only played like a 3 or 4 games for them because he got injured with Aston Villa a couple weeks ago. It's massive, and they need to, they have Santiago Bragno, to maybe, try, though the fact that they didn't try him here, even, he came on, the second half for Aston Villa, that says Gary O'Neill maybe doesn't trust him, so Wolves have some issues. The second half, there's not a ton to really talk about. There is a chance for Kevin Schade, comes from Damsgaard again, having a little pirouette of a turn on the ball. He's able to go past João Gomez like he's not really there. João Gomez is pretty good dual winning and winning the ball back and winning these 50-50s. And Damsgaard makes him look kind of foolish a little bit. And then he has a first touch. He sends Damsgaard in with a through ball. Maybe onside, maybe not. Kevin Schade is able to play 1v1 with the keeper, but that Johnson is able to make that save. And then we do get a fifth with Fabio Carvalho. Brentford have set this up by Damsgaard getting into the town, kind of the top of the box a little bit. In that usual 10 position, like I say, he's able to pick out Lewis Potter, and then Lewis Potter has a nice little burst of pace that I think surprises. Uh, so Lewis Potter is playing on the left, so it gets the right back. I guess it's Semedo, and just then he's able to square a ball kind of hard into the 6 yard area where Fabian Caballo is there for a tap in. I think it's poured by Sam Johnson because the clearance basically goes right to a Brentford player in his own end before this, so that's why Brentford are able to get the ball back earlier. Where it also comes from Fabian Caballo actually pressing Sam Johnson into a bit of a mistake. So it was that kind of day really for Wolves. Nothing was really going right despite getting 2 goals, and then they do get a third with Ait Nori to make it somewhat, I guess, tasteable. I don't know what you would say. Nothing probably would have tasted well after conceding 5. Uh, it was a bonkers game because normally you don't see that kind of high scoring fare either with either of these two teams. And Wolves were quite good last week versus Liverpool, despite not being great defending in the box. So kind of a little worried a little bit there. Maybe Liverpool should have done a little bit better. Again, 19 shots and 12 on target. Such a high XG for Brentford as well. Wolves did, again, 17 shots and 6. Wolves were able to create some moments themselves. They've got a pretty good attack. Forbes was able to get free and to create some danger. Mateus Cunha is a good player, and I just as well. And I think the thing is you're seeing Gary O'Neill play a different formation than he did last season. Now you've lost Pedro Neto, and I think that's kind of that's not going to be the reason why you conceded over 4 xG. But what that's done is you've maybe moved Mateus Cunha in maybe not his best position because you're forcing him to play out wide. Now he's getting on the ball and he's dribbling. He's going to carry it. But what that means is you leave in that space where someone maybe usually is, and he's not. When he carries it, maybe you lose the ball. Uh, Wolves are all over the place, really. And also, the way that Gary O'Neill allows his 2 fullbacks to play, Ian Nori and Tomato, both like to go forward than necessarily defend. They're just getting cut open left and right. And then when the cross is coming in, like I said, they're not really helping out in that case either. Already talked a little bit about Brentford, so don't need to necessarily do that anymore. And then I think feel like I've covered it up a little bit with Wolves. Uh, Hopefully he doesn't be the first manager that is sacked. I would feel a little bit bad. I don't know how much of that is his fault. Again, they've lost so many players over the years. This game was a really good example. Nathan Collins is someone that they used to have, and you don't really feel like they invested that money in like for like. Now they did bring in the Mascara guy, and yeah, it's not great to lose him so early in the season to a season-ending injury. But you've lost Nathan Collins, and then the next year you've lost Max Kilman, and that's kind of the spine of your defense. And again, Craig Dawson is a good player, but he's also older. He needs some help next to him. And if nothing else, I think one thing we'll see is we'll see maybe a bit of a formation change. They've got a little international break to work on things. If people aren't necessarily doing stuff with their international teams, uh, maybe we will see that. Maybe we'll see a return to a back three. Maybe you make Ait Nori and Semedo kind of wing backs than necessarily fullbacks. It's a little bit of a different role. Maybe you can try to do Mateus Cunha and Larson as kind of like a front two. almost like a 3-5-2 kind of formation. Maybe that makes a little bit more sense. Maybe you get a little bit more out of the players that you have. Andre and Yao Gomez and Lamina, those are pretty good options, to be honest, as far as who can you play in midfield. Like this team should not be struggling as much as it is, but it's a problem. And don't worry, there's the only thing to worry about is Erling Haaland awaits them next. And Wolves did beat Man City last season, but it doesn't feel like that is the same going to be an outcome this time. But we'll have to see. And then I will get started with Liverpool and the Arsenal and the Man Cities. I'm not necessarily going to do a rundown of everything that happens in the game, at least. For Liverpool and Crystal Palace, not a ton in the first half. Liverpool do go on to get the first goal with Diego Jota, a really nice ball by yes, Zemeckis gets a surprising start, and I think he does a pass that I don't think Robinson would have done. Robinson has been kind of get the ball and kind of bomb forward with it. Zemeckis has a beautiful little through ball. Gakpo is able to turn around Rodrigo Munoz, who just kind of loses him. So Liverpool able to get in behind, and then it's a nice little cutback ball that Diego Jota is able to kind of surprise by Trevor Chalobah, I believe, is the one that's marking him. He's able to run in front of him and able to finish it in. Uh, this game started off almost like it was going to be Palace's day, though. Liverpool conceded like the opening 30 seconds or opening minute into the game with Sarr being able to get in behind and then he able to find in a pass to I believe Nkadia, and Nkadia was able to finish it past Allison, but it was offsides, just barely, but it was offsides. But after that, Crystal Palace really didn't offer any kind of threat. The commentators were saying how poor Crystal Palace were, how they were because it was at Crystal Palace. It was opening game of the week, so it was the early game there. Uh, Palace were flat. The atmosphere was kind of flat, where normally that place is rocking. Liverpool maybe had a role in that because they were pressing Palace into so many mistakes. Adam Wharton did not look comfortable at all. We actually saw him hooked, so maybe that's why Palace's out of possession work was as poor as I can really recall. It was so easy for Liverpool to basically press, turn them over, win the ball back, and then Liverpool could do whatever they wanted. Whether it was McAllister, finding some pockets to do some quick through balls to quick 1-2s. Graffenberch was running things. Likewise, uh, Salah, Jota were able to create some danger. Gakpo was doing able to do whatever he want, but at the same time, it was still 1-0 going into the second half or going into halftime, and then Palace did get the second chance. So the first half for Palace was kind of bookends. Bookends were good, the opening and the closing. The middle was not. Palace did was able to get in behind. I think it's a pass by Maxence Lacroix who got maybe his first start for Crystal Palace. He has a great little ball. No, Maxence Lacroix is known for kind of his more aggressive kind of defensive style, and he was very good in the second half as well defensively. But here he showed a little bit what he can offer on the ball. He has a great little through ball that I think surprises Liverpool a little bit. It feeds in Sarr. Sarr is in behind. He's gotten behind Van Dijk and gotten behind Tsimikas. Allison has to make another big save, so it easily could have been 1-1 going into halftime. And so to get started there, I guess we'll kind of lead it off there, and then I'll pick it up in the second half. Second half, things did pick up. So Liverpool, coming into this, they had some midweek fun with Bologna, with Salah having a screamer to cap things off after a nice little assist to Alexis McAllister. And then Palace have struggled really to get going compared to how they ended the season last year. They really were on a flyer, not just in the kind of points that they were getting, the kind of goals that they were scoring. And the goals have dried up. No Elise is like 90% of it. And now Eze is maybe struggling a little bit from that. I also think the wing backs, Munoz and Mitchell, they're not being asked to just offer width. They're being asked to actually create a little bit themselves. They just can't really do that. And here, both were kind of exposed a little bit defensively, at least in that first half. Mitchell was getting the ball in some really dangerous areas, and when it came time for him to get a cross off, he wasn't really necessarily great either. Adam Wharton has struggled to start this season, and a little bit. I don't want to necessarily eat my words. He's so young. Uh, but Palace were better when Wharton went off and Will Hughes came on, and it's not necessarily a question of Palace finding these great kind of passes together with Hughes. Hughes has offered an incredible engine room where he was just running and he was going into challenges. He was being a little bit more physical, and it just lifted Palace entirely. And that change really did change things, as did bringing uh, Mateta on. And Mateta, got his got started off the bench, and when he came on, man, did that change things as well. Palace have created 2 chances really in the first half. Well, I think it was 1, but it was 2 because of the offsides. Second half, I think they created 9, or, I think they created 8. It was 9 total, so there you go. And if not for Allison having to make some big saves, and then, the backup keeper, for Liverpool having to make some saves, this easily could have ended, where Liverpool dropped points. Possibly could have ended where they lost. So that is where we are, here, and then we'll pick it up, in the second half. Uh, so do, 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 do. So early chance here to actually kill the game off. Bit of like we saw with Spurs, maybe you can say. Yeah, it's a beautiful ball by Van Dijk where he just loses. Palace lose Salah into the box. Trevor Chalobah got his start too. The back three for Crystal Palace was Maxence Lacroix, Mark Gahey. Both of them had really good games. Trevor Chalobah kind of struggled. They lost Salah here, and Salah just tries to hit this first time, or maybe he collects it and then tries to hit it first time, and Henderson does just enough to close him down. It was right at Henderson, but that easily could have gone in, and had it actually, had that happened, probably would have been game over with Liverpool having that 2-goal lead. Uh, and then we get to the fun, at least for Palace. So the game is still, 1-0, and then Palace do make their changes. Mateta comes on. Will Hughes comes on. Now, you have, someone that's a little get someone that'll always be kind of an annoyance into the box. You can go it long, and maybe he can, Van Dijk and Kanate are going to win most duels in the air, but Mateta is going to challenge as well. It's a different kind of presence than Nketiah is, and what I liked was Oliver Glasnow kept Nketiah on. He didn't do like for like, so he moved Nketiah to the right, and what he did, he didn't take Sarr off. He moved Sarr to wingback, and Sarr I thought was there. Just that change really did give Liverpool fits, 'cause Tsimikas had to deal with Sarr's pace already. He still had to deal with that. You have to deal with Nketiah, who's a striker minded, who has a shot on him, who has an eye for a goal. This made Palace much more of a threat when they had the ball. Now, maybe you can get them a little bit defensively, but Palace start to get all the chances here. So Nketiah forces an Alisson save. So you see the changes working here. Will Hughes wins the ball back, plays it to Mateta, who receives it, turns, finds Nketiah for a pop outside the box, but Alisson has to make the save. Then we have Eza forcing an Alisson save. Hughes again carrying it this time. Helping Palace or get out of Liverpool's press. Palace are able to find Mateta, then finds Eza. Again, it's outside the box, but it's a dangerous scoring opportunity. Eza gets a good power on it, and it still requires a pretty big save. And then Palace have a chance on a corner kick. Lacroix wins a header. Allison also has to parry that out. Palace fans wanted a PK here on Van Dijk getting a little handsy with Mark Gahey, but it's not awarded. Uh, but 3 chances quick in succession. This thing went from being super comfortable to not for Liverpool, and then Slot takes Salah off to bring Diaz on. Bit of a surprise, but that wasn't necessarily what necessarily did this. The 73rd minute things get weird. Liverpool are now struggling to find a way to progress upfield. Now, one thing I haven't said so far is at halftime, Arne Slot made some changes. He brought on Dominic Szoboszlai on and took Alexis McAllister off. And we saw what happened versus Nottingham Forest a couple of weeks ago when McAllister went off. That changed how comfortable Liverpool were in midfield. It wasn't necessarily the same time here. So the midfield was Szoboszlai, Gravenberch, and Curtis Jones. Curtis Jones ended up changing a little bit more deeper. Szoboszlai got back into his number 10 spot. But Liverpool were not able to press or not able to progress the ball nearly as well as they were in the first half, and just Alexis McAllister is kind of the heart of the team, and I do worry going forward what's going to happen when well, he's already now dealing with, some kind of, knee issues or some kind of tightness, and he just did, international duty. Uh, he is to say he's important is an understatement. He is everything, really, and, you do worry going forward what's going to happen if he's not able to if he has to, sit out some games, if he does pick up a muscle injury to overplay, uh because Liverpool when Liverpool have played without him, it hasn't looked nearly as good. So they're struggling. Liverpool are struggling now to progress the ball, and here it's being reshuffled backwards. No one's really being comfortable with it. It's going back to Allison. Allison then tries to boot things away, and he immediately falls down and does his hamstring. Uh, Palace then able to push the ball even backwards, and then Trent Alexander-Arnold passes it back to Allison, and Allison has to boot it with his other foot. Uh, Showing that his hamstring is just completely gone. He felt it pop. And now there's going to be no Allison, and Liverpool are now going into basically the heart of their schedule, because the next 10 games are going to be it's everyone. It's I think it's Aston Villa, it's Arsenal, it's Arsenal and Chelsea kind of yeah, at the front end. I think it's Chelsea for the next game, after the international break. But it's Arsenal, it's Chelsea, it's Real Madrid, it's Man City. I believe it is Aston Villa, and there's also Brighton in between there as well. So not a lot of ways to escape. Possibly just not just dropping points, but just the competition is going to drain the legs out of that squad. So a little worrying moment, and worrying as well that you're not going to have your number one keeper. And in this case, Kelleher has already played a couple of games because of Allison not suffering some kind of a knock even beforehand. Liverpool played well in those games, but here Kelleher was not able to play. And so Liverpool's number three had to come on, Yarios, and he was called to make a big save. He was, again, kind of the linchpin for anything positive Palace were doing. Runs to kind of stop the pass into the box, wins the ball back, has a challenge on Alexander Arnold, wins the ball there, and then is able to start a Palace counter. Mateta gets the ball, and there's only Van Dijk in front of him, and it looks like Palace almost have like uh, basically a 3-on-1. Uh, Liverpool are able to get some numbers back. I think Robertson actually does a really good job to at least get close to Nketiah. So basically, Mateta decides to not necessarily go that way. He decides to play in Eze. Eze is wide open on the left side because Alexander Arnold has just been beaten on that Hughes chance earlier. Eze is 1v1 with Yarios, and he hits it right basically at him. He still has to make a big save, and not just a big save, he catches it. Because if he parries it, it's possible that we could have gone to a Palace player as well. It was a monster save. He was also very good with his feet when he was asked to pick people out. Uh, so that was kind of Palace in a nutshell. Close, but kind of no cigar. Just wasn't their day. Um, I would have I had my notes. This would have been really nerving for Palace fans, but the way that they played in the second half, I think there's a lot to kind of build on here. Especially, I like the idea of trying Sarr and Nketiah together, not necessarily moving one out. I also like the idea of but make Mateta your number one, your kind of main striker. It's not like Nketiah necessarily played poor in that first half. He wasn't really getting a whole lot of service. Mateta is just a different kind of presence entirely. I just feel like Palace are better with him. And Munoz hasn't necessarily been poor. And Sarr is not really going to be known for his defensive work. But man, he was such a threat. Going making those runs in behind. Uh, and he maybe gives you a little of that if you're having kind of creative ability on the fullback side. Maybe he can kind of help fix with that. We'll have to see. They have to obviously change things up a little bit because before you could just basically the idea would you play with two tens and you give the ball to Eze or Elise. You have Mateta just kind of occupy their center backs and you let those two basically go to work. Create off each other. Basically do 1v1 stuff with each other. Basically take things into their own hands. Now you've got to actually do a little bit more to create for others. It's not as simple as just get it to one player to just kind of do some magic together. Uh, And I think Palace is kind of struggling by losing one of those cogs because with no Elise, now teams can focus on Eze, and I think he's struggling to start the season as well. Uh, and with Liverpool, uh, this comes at a cost. You're losing Allison, maybe possibly losing McAllister. We'll have to see how he does with the international break. But one player to talk about, he only had a brief cameo, but it's the second cameo he's come on and he's done what he's needed to do. Is Endo. So I'm hoping that Arne Slot can start to have some trust a little bit more in this player. Uh, yes, he's 31, but it's not necessarily like his legs are gone. I don't think he can play every game, every single week in and week out, game week, especially if you have 3 days of rest like Liverpool have been having with multiple games in each week. But here he's got a brain on him. And Endo came on and within a few minutes had a big crunching tackle on Hughes. Hughes had been bullying Liverpool's midfield that entire second half. Finally, someone was able to give a response. And then right as the ball was about to fall out and give Palace cheap little goal kick to restart things. He actually used his arm and knocked it, kept it from going out of bounds. Basically, it was a Palace throw in, and the ref didn't even see it. Palace players were incensed, but they have throw in, so maybe they didn't really care. And then they have a foul throw in, and Liverpool were able to get the ball back and basically kill the game that way. So the cheek actually did work. I liked it. I've liked what I've seen from Endo. There was that game versus West Ham where Endo was not at all bad, and now you're not asking him to play this kind of single pivot in the 4-3. You're doing things a little bit differently with the pivot. You're not. It's not Liverpool haven't been cut open nearly as much on the transition. Endo can do a job for you. I don't necessarily think Endo is bad back to goal either. I think he can collect the ball and help you with build up, and he's not going to be the most creative passer, but he doesn't really lose it. Going forward, you might need to see him a little bit more because they haven't brought anyone else in. They haven't brought they tried for Zubimendi. That didn't really work out. You can't do Alexis McAllister and Gravenberch every single game week. I don't really know if you can do Curtis Jones necessarily, and we haven't seen Tyler Morton, so Slot's going to have to trust Endo eventually. We'll have to see if he does. But this is one of those where you get 3 points and you take it. Liverpool with 16 shots. That's not bad. But 4 on target. That is. Diego Jota gets the first goal. He had a couple of chances though to actually finish it off in the first half, and kind of had some uncharacteristic kind of misses, which you wouldn't have thought after scoring the first one. But uh, and Szoboszlai and McAllister had some misses as well. Uh, a little nervy. The XG says Palace was 6.64. That to me doesn't feel right at all. 4 big chances for Liverpool, 2 for Crystal Palace. I feel like they had at least one. Um, because of the kind of saves. Now a lot of that shots were outside the box, but still they required some nice saves. Uh, so that is where we are there. Oh, I mean, going forward, Slot needs to, I think, trust Nunez. We haven't seen Gakpo tried on the left, and Nunez played with either Salah or maybe even Chiesa, or maybe you can do Diaz, I guess, if that is going to be the idea to give Salah a rest. But we haven't seen Gakpo and Nunez play together nearly as much as I would personally like to. We've seen Luis Diaz get a nice start to the season. I think Gakpo offers so many mismatches physically. It's different. I like I said, I think Gakpo is the best player to play on the left, or maybe even Jota. I don't really like Jota actually played through the middle. I've already spoken about before. Now, Nunez is not going to be the one that's always going to finish your chances, but he's always going to create so much chaos. It's going to allow others to create there instead. Uh, and we get to the international break. Uh, Speaking of Jota, actually, what they did was West Ham is what I really liked. He played Slot played Nunez in front of him and Jota as the 10. Jota underneath, almost like a second striker. Now you can't do that every game. I understand that, but in games when you know you're going to play against teams where you just get a couple goals and you win the game, basically, that is probably the most kind of goal scoring lineup I think you could do. Uh, Jota almost like a second striker, essentially, kind of given his that kind of role. I would love to see that going forward. Curtis Jones was played instead. Sloboslai was given a rest. Jones is good work rate, like Szoboszlai does. Liverpool really good at creating turnovers in that first half, creating chances, but at the same time, no one really has that final slip ball, kind of through ball, or the ability to do a quick like clever little dribble or uh, uh, a clever little move to beat a player in the box or to have a that kind of shot outside the box like you kind of need sometimes when games are you got a team that's playing basically three center backs that are very narrow and tight when you don't really have a ton of space. So that's where, missing Chiesa, missing Harvey Elliott as well still hurts, and they're about to get Harvey Elliott, so that's at least positive. We'll see what Chiesa is like after the international break. They're going to need Chiesa at least when they get to that kind of like I said, that daunting of a schedule coming up. Uh, and so that is kind of where we are there. We're going to know what Liverpool are in the next month and a half, whether or not this is sustainable, whether or not this is going to be a very good team that's going to be happy to get Champions League. I do think again the ownership has put this team into a kind of a must win. With they got to do it all now because I feel like regardless of how this is Slot's first season and things are going great now, the future does not look nearly as promising with those three star players. Salah, Trent, Alexander Arnold, and and Virgil van Dijk being on the last years of the contract and not necessarily it doesn't sound like they're going to renew, or all three are going to renew, and it feels like already there's starting to be really bad reporting, leaking that if whatever contracts are being offered, they're not really upping the wages, they're not meeting the wage demands that these players really want. It's a two-way street. Sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes it's not, and replacing all three is going to cost so much more than trying to eating basically a wage bill. But that is kind of what Liverpool's ownership has done. They also haven't been ambitious when they could have been. Signing Chiesa for $10 million is not ambition to me. Uh, Another thing too, I talked about Fabio Carvalho being a number 10. You're now playing a position or formation week in and week out that has a number 10. Why would you not keep Fabio Carvalho? Um, they just, yeah. If it doesn't work out, FSG is going to be a big problem. Why? And Arne Slot has done amazing to get them where they are now, but also Jurgen Klopp left this 11 and kind of bench in a pretty good spot too. Um, but it is brittle. We've already seen Alexis McAllister go down. We're gonna see if Kelleher can do a job versus Chelsea, which he has been able to do. Kelleher has actually played Chelsea in a couple of those cup finals, but then he's gonna go up against Arsenal, and Arsenal known for that set piece magic. Do worry not having Allison for that, but we'll get to that when we do. And then with Crystal Palace, I think I've already said a little bit the lack of intensity really the first half, and then the second half was much better. That's where Will Hughes, kind of came to play and came to help them out. I do like the setup though. The back three, it was Chalobah's kind of first game. He struggled a little bit, but I do think they can get better. I really did like Mark Gahey, and I really did like Maxence Lacroix. I thought he was, it's a couple of defenders have made the jump this past this past summer. That Man United signed Delict, Palace signed Lacroix, Fulham signed Anderson of Palace, and West Ham signed Tadibo. And those three have actually been maybe better to start their seasons than the Mateus Delict. But still a lot of season to go, and that is kind of where we are there. No wins yet for Palace but I do feel like there's loads to be positive about as far as them surviving. Any kind of ambition as far as maybe pushing for a Europe spot, yeah, that probably is out the door. But Crystal Palace Palace fans have known for being kind of in that kind of scary kind of relegation fight. I think there will be enough where they're not even in a relegation fight, but they won't. Maybe 13th or 12th, maybe even 14th. Maybe that kind of would be where they're finished, but we'll have to see. And then with Arsenal and Southampton, you get Cam Archer actually getting the first goal. It comes in the second half though, and then Havertz, and then Martinelli, and then Saka at the end. A lot of this was Southampton's own doing. To be honest, now they were trying to. Arsenal created 14 chances, but the XG wasn't really that high. Arsenal were getting a lot of touches in and around the box. They were getting, they were, they Arteta started with a kind of a different kind of lineup. He went with Sterling, he went with Havertz and Jesus together, and Arsenal were getting loads of turnovers left and right. Southampton were trying to play from the back and making mistakes, and it wasn't really good. Sterling was making some runs in the box, tried to draw a PK here and there. Um, but that said, Arsenal were it came to a point where eventually, do you have enough where do you have finishers, do you have strikers on the ball or not? That question still remains. Now, that said, the way that they get the Havertz goal, that required a strike. That required someone, doing something one v one and having the right finish. And he did. He picked out the net beautifully. He had a really nice finish. But that was a little bit maybe a concern, you can say. Arteta changed things up a little bit. Also, there was no right back for him. No a Timber, who had been very good for them the last few games, and no Ben White still. So we saw Thomas Partey, and actually, I feel like that maybe is where their goal, where the Southampton goal came from, because Thomas Partey isn't really known for being that kind of role, and basically he's not in position on the Southampton goal. And then when he does get back, he runs away from the danger. Basically, I think he's trying to mark maybe someone making a run in, but I think the danger is more where Archer has the ball. Anyways, it doesn't really matter. We saw Jorginho and Declan Rice, and then again Saka, Havertz, Jesus, and Sterling, and then Calafiori, and Saliba and Gabriel to finish the back. But that is a bit of a shakeup, a little bit. Jorginho and Declan Rice is not necessarily a detriment. We haven't always seen Jorginho yet. I do think if the way where Arsenal conceded is where they can be a little bit exploited. Now, here they're about to get Odegaard, so it's not going to always be this kind of lineup. We're seeing Saka being forced to basically kind of just do it all when he doesn't have any kind of fullback help. He doesn't have Party doing an overlap or Jorginho. Saka's getting the ball, and he's either having to create himself or he's having to cross essentially. And what he does is he creates a couple of these goals. He has that cross to Martinelli in the second half. And then he's able to apply the finish to basically get that third. Uh, but the other thing too is you see a work rate on Saka that maybe doesn't always go noticed, but here it definitely does, because that's what creates Arsenal's first goal. Uh, I think it's Flynn Downs. Flynn Downs is trying to of Southampton is trying to, it's not even like a risky pass, but he telegraphs where he wants to pass it basically. And Flynn Downs in that second half for Southampton was given the ball left and right, and you keep seeing him kind of raising his hand, apologizing, and here Saka just reads him, and he's able to. The goal really comes from Saka anticipating and winning the ball back, and then basically they're able to find Havertz 1v1, and he's able to apply the finish, a pretty good finish from Kai Havertz, to be fair to him. And back to back weeks, he scored. Actually, he's got a really good scoring rate to start the season. Quietly enough. Uh, but that is kind of where we are. The way that the first half went was weird, because Arsenal were very decent in the opening, but at the same time, you just didn't know. 14 shots, but it's not like Ramsdale had a whole lot to do in that first half. But Southampton also weren't necessarily good either. Probably the main talking point in the first half was Ross Stewart got hurt, had to go off, and on comes Cam Archer, who has struggled in that role, that striker role. Hasn't He's not really known for being someone to be reliable when it comes to hold on to the ball, just to allow Southampton to escape pressure. But what he is good at is he does have some pace to him, and as we've seen here, he does have a finish to him as well. And so, uh, yeah, the halftime, I did have a note that Arsenal's attack had a lot of skilled technical players. But again, who really is known for their ball striking? Sometimes you just kind of need that. All of the kind of biggest danger moments in that first half came from Thomas Partey and Jorginho strikes, outside the box from cutback crosses from Saka. Southampton, though, they didn't concede, but they weren't really good. But that said, 0-0, you'll take that. Ramsdale didn't have much to do. Ramsdale was he was being quite aggressive on Arsenal set piece and corner deliveries, so there was somewhat there. But the second half, we did get a different game. I mean, there was a lot of drama in the second half, obviously. So you just figured Arsenal would dominate and slowly kill the game off, and we didn't really get that. So here we have Dibbling taking on Calafiori, beating him 1v1. He's able to get Southampton basically hit their first scary look at Raya's net. Fernandez is able to get a flick and it just misses the crossbar. And then a couple minutes after that, they get their first goal. They open things up, and it comes from the substitute, Cam Archer. And it is a great finish on him, and really really good for him because he's a player that he had a couple of chances to score for Ipswich, wasn't able to take it. He had that missed PK versus Man United, which also would have given Southampton the lead. Or at least that was a Onana save, you can say. So he is a striker that when you get in space, he can cause some problems, but maybe not really. Again, kind of a hold up guy, but here it starts with Sterling getting the ball in the middle of the field, and he gets caught surprise from behind by Fernandez, and Fernandez catches him, wins the ball back, and then floats something just first time to Cam Archer running onto it. He cuts inside to go past Saliba, finding the net, and Saliba possibly could do better, but Saliba is forced to be the last man back because Thomas Partey is the right back is nowhere. He's upfield centrally, so you get it. Arteta is trying to basically overload the midfield here. Thomas Partey isn't really a fullback by trade, so it makes sense he would be more comfortable there. But the space, that means he was leaving some space out wide. Now, usually, Liverpool do this with Kanate. If you do that, your center back is 1v1 with someone. If a ball is sent over the top, they've got to be able to to handle that. And Saliba has allowed someone to cut inside him, but at the same time, Thomas Partey is able to run backwards, and instead of again engaging Cam Archer on, he tries to kind of stop a pass into a runner into the box. That is danger as well. So I don't know how much you can really go with him. But yeah, all of a sudden, Arsenal were down to Southampton, but it didn't take long. They quickly equalized with Havertz, and again, it comes from Flynn Downs, who who was poor. Telegraphs a pass, Saka steps in front of it and finds Havertz, and Havertz is able to find that net. And then Arteta makes a triple change. He brings on Trossard, brings on Martinelli, brings on Marino, and then basically Trossard, Martinelli start causing problems almost immediately after coming on. Mourinho is also a presence into the box, so anytime Arsenal are doing these crosses left and right, Mourinho is like 6 foot something, and I think you're starting to. I don't know how much or he's going to play, how much Arteta is thinking about him, but Marino does have that Granit Xhaka kind of presence a little bit. And again, it's another case where Martinelli is able to come on and scores. And so here, Saka gets on the ball after Partey carries it. Saka gets all this attention. He gets the ball from the outside of the box and basically cuts in towards goal. He sees Sugawara is completely falling asleep, and Saka does an in-swinging cross that finds Martinelli. All he has to do is touch it past Ramsdale. But it was still 2-1 going into the 80th minute. Southampton did create some moments here. Tyler Dibbling had a shot that basically deflected off, I think, Declan Rice. It basically bounces off the near post. Raya dives. I don't think he gets a save. Then the ensuing corner kick. Hardwood Bellis has a free header, completely free, and he misses it. I think it hits his shoulder. Raya also missed it as well, and the ball basically just bounced on the top crossbar. And then Dibbling also created another danger moment, waiting for Sugawara to overlap him. Sugawara has a cutback ball. He runs past Calafiori, then he has a cutback cross into the box. Raya also misses that one too, but it also missed all the Southampton players. So it was still 2-1 going in like the 85th minute. It felt like maybe Arsenal could be in danger, and then Arsenal made it 3-1 to kill it off. So it starts with a long ball from Saliba to Kai Havertz. Havertz outjumps Flynn Downs. Flynn Downs is like 5'8", so that's probably not that hard that's a really good matchup for Arsenal in that situation. Then Havertz also does well to swing out his long legs on a loose ball, and he's able to keep it alive and able to find Trossard. And then Trossard's able to carry it upfield, gets to the penalty area, lose the ball, but Southampton can't clear it, and it just finds Saka trailing the run, and he's able to find the net as well. I'll get to Southampton. I mean, it's Flynn Downs has been an important player for them. I don't necessarily think it's necessarily all on him. I am a little bit surprised we haven't seen Leslie Ugachakwu, basically insert himself as being like a week in and week out starter. Or the other option is a bit of a surprise. We haven't seen more Adam Lallana, and I'll get to Southampton a little bit later on. But Arsenal, 3 points is all that matters, and they are able to get it with the shuffled lineup. And they're soon, they're missing both fullbacks and missing Odegaard. Yeah, they weren't great, but Arteta was able to make some changes, and they were better after the changes. And also, Kai Havertz continues to produce for them, whether or not it's believable or not. He seems to embrace that role of beating the doubters. I mean, 29 shots and 6 on target, though a lot of that did come in the second half. Southampton with at least the shots on target, the XG over 2. Southampton with 8 shots, only 2 on target. I mean, Ramsdale was only asked to make 3 saves, but outside the ones that actually beat him. So I don't know how much that really works out. But Arsenal were better after the changes with Trossard, Martinelli, and Marino being able to offer a little bit more of a threat, kind of in the box. Uh, and it felt Southampton had done pretty decent until like the 65th minute, and then there it goes. So with Arsenal, the takes are. Uh, what do you think of here? Because back to back weeks they've struggled a little bit versus a newly promoted side. The newly promoted sides are maybe better than last season. Still yet to be determined. Uh, but here as well, 30 chances in both games. I don't really know how much to obsess over this. If there is warning, I think you're about to get Martin Odegaard back after the international break, so that changes a little of your creativity. If nothing else, you're getting a lot of good out of Shaka, and you're starting to get Martinelli kind of coming back into his form a little bit. So uh, there's a lot to be positive about. I don't know how much you can rely on Jorginho and Rice in a pivot, or not, maybe even Partey. Still, you still have time find a way to maybe fit in Raheem Sterling and Gabby Jesus. It wasn't necessarily the best to hear, but they were able to create some lineups and still able to create some danger. And then with Southampton, I think the troubling thing for them is they keep trying to play through pressure, and they aren't good enough doing it. And just simple mistakes every single game week is leading to a high turnover, and it's leading to a goal. It happened. It's Arsenal here, but it was Brentford before that. It was Newcastle when they were down to 10 men. And it's not necessarily like they're playing from the back in this case, but it's Glenn Downs just telegraphs a pass and just trying. It's funny how sometimes like the safe pass, like a simple square pass, you think is more dangerous than actually trying to go forward. And it just feels like he's trying to. Glenn Downs was trying to be cute, trying to be safe with the ball, and Saka reads it, steps in front of it, and you concede that way. Uh, I mentioned Leslie Ukashukwu. Adam Lallana was rested and then featured in the second half was Bournemouth. Adam Lallana was probably their best player the week before versus Ipswich when it felt like Southampton should have won that game too, where Lallana was able to find Tyler Dibbling, where Dibbling was able to apply the finish. Created some moments also for Cam Archer to finish Ipswich off, and he wasn't able to do it. I don't understand why Lallana was listed on the bench, because if he was listed on the bench, he could have been fit at least to bring on the second half to at least have someone with his experience to handle that situation a little bit better than what we saw, because they just they have the lead, and then just after 65th minute maybe they just let it get the better of them. Uh, I don't really know what to end with that. Some positives were, Tyler Dibbing is quite good. He keeps being a standout player for them, but that's about it. No Brimington Diaz here. It doesn't feel like Russell Martin necessarily trusts him a ton. Diaz did not have his best game, a week ago versus Bournemouth. He brought on uh, Adam Armstrong, and Adam Armstrong isn't likewise hasn't been able to produce like he has in the championship. And then you lose kind of your main striker to start the game in Stewart. So kind of nerving moments for Southampton, but you probably would have expected that coming in just 7 games into the season. And then with Manchester and Fulham, and then I'll get to the United game, and then that'll probably be it because I am going over for time. Uh, I mean, the city with Fulham, it ends 3-2. I mean, Andres Pereira gets the first goal. Not really what you would have expected. City actually started quite well, and then all of a sudden you look and Fulham have the first goal, and Fulham actually had some of the better moments when City had like corner kicks, or City were the ones attacking, and then Fulham were just lightning quick on the counter. And then Kovacic with 2, not what you would expect at all. It was 1-1 going into halftime, and then Kovacic, early in the halftime after a really nice cross in by Phil Foden, is able to find Bernardo Silva, and then Bernardo Silva just finds someone in the box, and it's a cutback ball, and Kovacic has a great hit on that. And then Jeremy Doku makes it 3-1, and in between all this, Fulham were having fun finding Adama Traore, just being able to run in behind and make Ederson have to work to save his lunch. Uh, but every single time, Adama Traore isn't able to apply that finish, and so it was still 2-1. It was kind of a nervy moment actually for City in the second half because Fulham started to actually pass around and play around Man City, actually keep the ball into the box, keep the pressure actually in the City's own end. Not usually what you see from a Fulham side, or not really what you see anyone do to Man City. But again, I'm going to get into that a little bit. Why I think that is obviously the main thing is no having Rodri. So it was 2-1, and then Jeremy Doku made it 3-1, and that kind of did kill the game. Fulham did get a second with Rodrigo Muniz in the 88th minute, but game pretty much was over after the Doku, and the Doku hit came from kind of nothing. It's a player that you wouldn't expect this kind of hit to come from. So Man City were, they had that solid midweek performance in the Champions League. Phil Foden coming off with a goal. A lot of talk about Rico Lewis being praised as well. It felt like they had a pretty good bounce back after the 2 draws with Arsenal and Newcastle. And then you come into this and not what they would have expected at the Etihad, but they were able to Man City or on the way to a 5-peat or trying to because they pull things out like this. The one thing you're saying, looking at the scoreline, looking at the stats, is no Phil Foden. Phil Foden didn't really have any kind of input in any of the goals except for maybe the second Kovacic goal. They couldn't find him, and I think going forward, that missing Rodri, gonna miss him for when Man City are trying to build up. He's always a blanket when it comes to that. He's brilliant at that kind of ball progression. He gets the ball, he turns it. He's always forward minded with it. He's also just a genius when it comes to kind of being a playmaker a little bit. And he wasn't. Phil Foden was looking for the ball, and Kovacic didn't want to play that pass into the pockets, or or Ruben Diaz or Nakanji when he had the ball. Just Phil Foden wasn't able to really get on the ball much. And because Phil Foden wasn't able to get on the ball much, Holland wasn't able to get the ball much either. And so, again, still missing Kevin De Bruyne as well. And so until they get Kevin De Bruyne back, and he might be back after the international break, Holland's goals have started to dry up, and I don't think that's like for like. I don't think that's a coincidence. Uh, so we get started. I don't want to spend a ton of time, at least in the details. It felt like they did start strong. There was an early chance for Gundogan that the shot just missed wide. That there was an early chance also for Foden and Holland doing a little 1-2 together. Foden plays Holland in. It was only one of the few times they actually did find Holland, and he gets a shot off. But Holland was maybe just a little too far away from the penalty box for it to really trouble Leno much. Again, it felt like City were in complete control 10 minutes into the game. And then Fulham get the first look at Ederson, and we get a preview of what was to come with the Traore. Raul Jimenez sends a hopeful ball forwards, and Rico Lewis is there. This shouldn't be an issue, but the Traore blazes past him. And he gets 1v1 with Ederson, and Ederson's able to make the big save. And then it's just, again, it's a good save that Ederson's able to keep it out. He also makes the save by diving with his legs. So this was more of kind of a kudos to Ederson than necessarily Traore messing up his chance. But we will bookmark that because I do think you can go be a little bit more critical with the other chances. But yeah, lo and behold, it was 1-0 Fulham. Where again, the way the City started the game, you wouldn't have expected that. But it wasn't just Adama space that was giving City fits. It was Anthony Robinson, US, that was starting to venture forward, and there just wasn't a fear factor with Bernardo Silva as kind of the City wide man, opposite of Anthony Robinson. So he started feeling like he could go forward, leave Bernardo Silva completely free. To be honest, um, felt like Calvin Bassett could handle either Holland or Bernardo Silva, and Fulham were actually being quite brave with both fullbacks. And so Robinson's able to get forward. Adama Traore has already got Rico Lewis's attention, and then you have Anthony Robinson, a sprinter himself, that's able to run off him, and that's really hard to stop. And Robinson has a very good cross into the box. Fulham still have a lot to do here. Jimenez is able to collect it, but then he plays it to Iwobi, and then Jimenez continues his run. City allow it to go unmarked, and then right when Diaz and Gavardiol kind of get a body on Jimenez, the ball is kind of bouncing, and he does the cheekiest kind of back heel to play in. It's like the ball is bouncing, and he hits it with his back heel is kind of like across itself, and it finds Andres Pereira just wide open in the box for something to put your body on, and they're able to get it. And it's a crazy move by Raul Jimenez, and I think the one thing to think about is this is a player that is finally starting to get his confidence back, and it's because of plays like this that you can say that with. He's on a bit. Coming into this, he was on a bit of a heater, scoring like the last three goals. He didn't score here, but he set up this goal, and he set up Adama Traore on 3 or 4 occasions where again Fulham really could have been out of sight, out of mind. But before that, Man City did get 2 goals because of Kovacic. So after a brilliant counterattack here, where it felt like Fulham were in a 2v1 situation for City, Pereira carries the ball upfield, feeds it to Iwobi in the box. Uh, but let's see. Oh, before that, there was maybe another chance to make it to 2-0. So even before the Kovacic happens. So Pereira carries the ball upfield. He feeds Iwobi into the box, and it's probably not the best ball because it's behind him. And then Iwobi squares it into Adama's path. And here, Edison does well to come out, and Adama does well to clip it over him, but it's just a little too much it's just a little too much power. That one just flies over the net, but easily could have gone in. I think that's the problem for City is Gvardiol and the Gvardiol City's left back. He loses the ball, so all of a sudden you don't have someone to deal with when Pereira gets the ball. There's just wide open space if he wants to carry it, and he does. But the other thing too is Adama Traore and Iwobi outsprint everyone on City's team to join Pereira. So Kovacic and Lewis, Gundogan, etc. So that's another case where there's not that protection if City do lose the ball. You have to start thinking about that going forward. But anyways, City do get a couple of these goals. First from Kovacic, it's a corner kick, and he just off the corner kick he just has just a lash at it and is able to get enough power to score. And then the second half, already mentioned how Phil Foden gets up free, he has a really nice cross, and Bernardo Silva finds Kovacic for a similar kind of hit. And then we have a couple of the chances for more chances for Adama Traore. So Jimenez drops to receive the ball, sees the open space, plays that for Adama Traore, and here it's different because Pep now has brought on Kyle Walker. In the one of the notes I had beforehand was it was Rico Lewis, and I was like, well, Pep maybe got a little too cute. Maybe he could have tried Kyle Walker instead of Rico Lewis because Walker versus Adama Traore, you figure that's probably a better matchup here. Adama Traore still beats Kyle Walker in a sprint, so that doesn't work. And again, it's 1v1 with Ederson. Here, I think this is the one you can go at him and be a little critical of, because yes, he Ederson comes out and I think he's trying to basically hit it between his legs, and he just gets too much height on it. So it's right at Ederson, and Ederson's able to just block it. But the way that Ederson is coming out and the way that he's already got around Kyle Walker, Adama easily could have taken this touch around and gone past him to have a tap in. And it's just one of those cases where he's never really been known for being a finisher. He is an amazingly gifted athlete, and he's incredible with his close touch control as well. For being as big and physical as he is, he's quite good with his feet. He's a Barca product. You definitely see that coming through. But it's just that this is the one thing where he's not. He's always been kind of critical because if he could get that other piece fixed, this is a player that would every club in the world, I think, would look at. To be honest, there's not a lot to that negative to his game other than that. But that is the but. And then like I said, the thing that's funny is you figured that's how the game would go. That's how maybe City would have some moments when Fulham would be able to count on them in the second half after Marcus Silva made some changes after he brought on Tom Carney and Smith Rowe on. Fulham were just quite good at doing clever buildup and just being having sustained pressure in the Man City's end. And again, this is not something you normally see that happens at the Etihad or that happens versus Pep. And so that is kind of where we end that game with. What a It really was an enjoyable game. I mean, Man City did have their moments, 20 shots, 7 on target. Fulham with 11 and only 4, but 5 big chances, and that's where you look at what Adama did. But the possession, 42%, and it wasn't a fluke. Fulham were much better at just sustaining some of that pressure in the second half and just a little unlucky. One thing I didn't talk about is, during some of that pressure, João Jimenez had 2 moments where, if not for some big blocks by Gvardiol, he probably scores in this game as well. So lots of things. If you're an Arsenal fan, you're trying to look for some creek cracks for City. This probably should give you some hope there. Now that said, still no Kevin De Bruyne, so I mean that's not really gonna help South City defensively, but Kevin De Bruyne is going to find ways to get Holland a little bit more involved than we've seen. Uh, but other than that, this has to give you a lot of hope because in the first half, it was Rico Lewis, and you just figured, yeah, Adama Traore would probably be a better matchup for him. The second half, it was Kyle Walker, and they still weren't able to stop this. So, yes, that has to be a concern for Pep. So we'll see how they change it or not. And then it looks like they got some good news, at least on Monday, regarding some charges against them. We don't know how much that'll change what's supposed to come out in in January or December. I mean, there's still, the 115 charges against them, whether or not they're going to hit with points deductions. If they are, being in second place wouldn't be the worst kind of position to for Arsenal or Liverpool or whoever. So we'll have to follow that when it comes. And then with Fulham, I think I've already kind of talked a little bit about them. One of the interesting things is Adama Traore, when he's played this season, has usually played on the right side, and here he was on the left. And it feels like Marco Silva did that on purpose. I don't know if he figured it was gonna be Rico Lewis and not Kyle Walker. That would have been, really cheeky on his end. But by doing that, he also played Alex Iwobi on the right, and Iwobi was every bit as good as Adama. Now, he wasn't creating those goal moments, but Iwobi was very good as well. Defensively, he was getting the better of Gvardiol on the wing side, uh, and Grealish really wasn't, doing a whole much either. That's another thing too. Pep tried to be maybe a little too cute with the lineup, where he went with Bernardo Silva and Grealish on the 2 wings. He didn't do Doku or Savinho, and Doku came on, and Doku had a hit that we just don't normally see him do. I didn't talk about the third goal that City scored. It was a beautiful goal, one of the better ones of the weekend, and we'll see going forward if Doku starts to do a little of that confidence more. Where when he cuts inside, he tries to be a little bit more selfish. Usually, he's hesitant, uh, but you don't want him to be too selfish and to go for goal or go for that shot every time. You want him to still be able to create a little bit for Holland, but just that threat of the shot should maybe open him to get around people to create as well. Uh, Savinho, I'm a bit surprised we haven't seen him being the full time starter because Bernardo Silva does a lot of things for you. I think he's better when he's played through the middle, and that could be one way that Pep kind of figures things out. Now, Bernardo Silva doesn't have the physical component to play in the middle, but what he is he's gonna be that player that will find that 8-yard pass in front of you, where you're able to get Foden the ball, allow Foden to turn or Kevin De Bruyne to turn, and then you go that way. Because right now, Man City are struggling with that. You figured Gundogan would be good at doing that too, but too often in that first half, I thought Gundogan was playing too far ahead of the ball, and it was Kovacic. Kovacic was the one on the ball, or it was Rico Lewis, and they just weren't able to find Phil Foden the way that you would expect. So there could have been some of that due to the way that Fulham were being aggressive out of possession. You can say they weren't necessarily pressing high in the beginning, but they were very good. They're playing a pretty good mid block. And to continue with Fulham, the defense is good each week. They have 2 really good fullbacks in Tade and Robinson, and 2 really good center backs in Calvin Bassey and Anderson. They lose Tosin, and they bring in Anderson. and it feels like they haven't lost anything by doing that. And you think about it, they kept Howland and Foden quiet, and beaten by two really nice strikes by Kovacic outside the box, and then a worldie from Doku. So if you're Marco Silva, you have to really like the way that this is coming together. You have to like that Raul Jimenez and Adama Traore, nice little throwback to when they were Wolves. You're starting to find some of that chemistry again. You're starting to actually see them. They have some pieces to bring on as far as depth. Reese Nelson comes on. He gets a an assist to the second striker in the pecking order in Rodrigo Munoz. So Fulham starting to you maybe think of things differently as far as depth wise. And the other thing to talk about is one player I haven't mentioned yet that did come on in the second half is that I really liked was Tom Corning. And I am curious because Tom Corney isn't necessarily small. I think he's 5'11" or 6 feet. I feel like he can be one of those options in midfield where they're still struggling a little bit with Sanderberger or if it's Lasa Lukic or Harrison Reed or whoever's supposed to be kind of the defensive minded midfielder in the system. Now that you've lost Yao Polina, I am wondering if you can maybe do a Sanderberger and instead of Sasa Lukic, maybe you try Tom Carney instead. I feel like Carney's got some of that ability to pick locks a little bit, and I just feel like he's very good in with the ball at his feet. He can carry it. He can pass with it. I just feel like anytime you do get to see him come on and do a cameo, he looks good. So I'm a bit surprised we haven't seen more of him. I'll be curious if we do see more of him going forward. And then that is kind of where we are. I'm not going to do all of the teams. Chelsea and Nottingham Forest. This ends 1-1. This could have ended anything, really. Uh, Chris Wood and Madueke. The way that finally we saw Chelsea having to play a bit of a different team, but a bit of a different setup, and it did give them a little bit of some fits. They didn't have a lot of that space to run it behind. Cole Palmer wasn't able to get the ball on the turn nearly as much as he had been. It looked like Nottingham Forest went into this with a pretty sound game plan to have Ryan Yates or James Ward-Prowse when he was playing. James Ward-Prowse got sent off in this game, or Elliot Anderson. To any time that it felt like they had zones, and anytime Cole Palmer went into a zone, get a body on him as quickly as possible. And Nottingham Forest also did a really good job to kind of make Jackson not really a bit of a threat either. It took Chelsea 40 minutes until they actually got a shot on goal, and it was just a shot by Enzo, which was comfortably saved. Now, before the end of the half, Chelsea did get a really good moment. It was one of the times when Cole Palmer was able to be really influential. And basically, the ball finds it's Madueke maybe. Madueke is able to basically get past Alex Moreno, and then he has a cutback ball. It looks like Cole Palmer is going to get on the end of this for a pretty nice hit, and then Oli Anya does just enough to stick out a leg. Easily could have bounced in. It easily could have been an own goal. That was probably the biggest danger moment that Nottingham Forest had in the first half. Speaking of Madueke was probably the most influential or involved player for Chelsea. They created 3 or 4 chances for him, but he wasn't able to really find the net. He was cutting inside and he kept trying to shoot. He was getting close, but he wasn't able to put anything on net. Nope, not much for Cole Palmer, not much for Nicholas Jackson. It was a little bit different than what we'd seen. It wasn't like Nottingham Forest last week. Chelsea were not able to have the spaces that they were offered before in those other games. West Ham even before that. Nottingham Forest have shown to be very good, very hard to play through out of possession. Liverpool had so many fits as well, and so as that happened, it was a little bit surprising to see that the kind of the lineup that Enzo Maresca went with, or kind of the way that he was playing them. So he's trying to fit in. They had Marlo Gusto back, but they were playing him in midfield when Forest had it was basically like 5-4-1. Forest had because Elliot Anderson was just really playing in narrow as well. You had Chris Wood kind of by himself a little bit. There was really no passing lanes at all in the midfield. Chelsea had the ball. Forest didn't care if you had the ball. Forest weren't really trailing, so it was a little bit surprised that Chelsea weren't trying to maybe do some overlaps to try to create some mismatches on the wing side. Instead, because that kind of was where the space was at. So a little bit of the kind of a just a bit of a wake up call where what you were doing beforehand. If you're not given all that space, how can you manufacture something differently? If Cole Palmer is going to be kind of locked up, can Jaden Sancho or Madueke or someone else beat someone 1v1? They were able to get one back with Madueke, and then I think that the real surprise is uh, they get back in the game. So Chris Wood gets the first goal. I think it's an alpha free kick where one of the defenders has a knock on header, and Chris Wood's able to stick a leg out. And then after that, Cole Palmer is able to find Madueke. Madueke takes on Alex Moreno again, and then this time he is able to find the net. But then there's I think a long ball sent in for Jackson, and uh, or not even that. There's a pass back to I think James Ward-Prowse, and he lets the ball slip under his feet, and he just freaks out and he falls on the ball with his hand. He's already on a yellow. He's taken out. Chelsea have 30 minutes plus whatever stoppage time to actually win this game. Essentially, you've tied it 1-1. Now you're going against 10 men. You have the extra man, and it never felt like Chelsea really did make that count until we got to extra time. Funny enough, the other event that happened was Morgan Gibbs White got hurt. So he got clipped from behind in the first half, and he continued on playing. And I don't necessarily know if he was playing injured on it or not, but he's trying to take a shot, and it's his plant leg that just kind of buckles on him, and his ankle just really twists bad. It did look really bad. I don't really know if they say they're going to try to get him back after the international break. That would be a plus. If not, there actually is a player that has started to kind of shine for them in these bench moments, and that is Jota Silva. And Jota Silva was very good coming on in the second half as well. And the funny thing about this is Nottingham Forest are known for being super pragmatic, as you say. Nuno is known for being a very defensive minded coach. Nottingham Forest went balls to the wall to try to win the game, even down a man. And they created a number of looks where Robert Sanchez, both keepers really were forced to make a number of really big saves. Towards the end, there's one specifically where Forest were able to create a turnover, create a chance of field where Nico Williams has a shot. It's a very good save by Robert Sanchez. And then Chelsea, had a chance to counter themselves. Mudryk was able to get on the ball. He has a really nice sprint to go all the way down the line. Finally, you have someone keeping some width, and his cross into the box finds Nkuku. And Nkuku gets a good head on it, but Matt Sells is able to save that as well. Again, both keepers were working quite good, and then towards the end as well, right before the end of the game, Forest have another chance to get some kind of either get a free kick or get some kind of a final attack going. They get another cross into the box, and Jota Silva is right there, free header, and he heads it. He does everything he's supposed to do. He heads it hard. He heads it to the ground. Robert Sanchez again is there to keep the point for Chelsea. Uh, so this was a bonkers game. It took a while for it to get going, but it really did get going in the second half. As far as kind of the lineup goes, nothing that surprising. Enzo and Casado, tried again. I don't necessarily know if that's the best midfield pairing for Chelsea, especially in these kind of games. Maybe in other games it'll work. I just felt like Casado too often than not is kind of playing by himself, and Enzo just doesn't offer you any kind of help engine wise or not. They weren't able to get Cole Palmer the ball nearly enough. Sancho was doing an okay job, but he's ball to feet. He likes being creative. He doesn't really like taking someone on, and Cucurella likewise isn't offering overlap help. Cucurella is playing inverted. Both fullbacks are playing inverted, so I just feel like you're Nottingham Forest set up to be very, very narrow-minded and compact the middle as much as possible. Chelsea helped out with that. The only one that was really direct was Madueke. Madueke was also being direct by also running more into the crowded midfield or middle. He was just able to squeeze something by at the last minute, but it was a yep, it was a little bit of a learning curve, a little bit of a wake up call for Chelsea. But talking about how they like playing with teams that give them space. Liverpool give teams a lot of space, and we'll see how Liverpool and Chelsea fare after the international break. Looking at the stats this game is wild. I mean, 22 shots and 8 on target. Nottingham Forest was 16 themselves and 9. 4 big chances for Forest, 3 for Chelsea, 8 saves for Sanchez, 7 for Matt Sells. This was a fun game. Uh, so I think the thing for Chelsea is the depth of the squad. You kind of forget, if Enzo can put some pieces together, you forget how large the squad is. Mudrick came on, actually has looked pretty good the last couple of weeks. Believe it or not, apparently looked very good in Conference League games for them. And he came on and had a really nice cross into the box in Cuckoo. The only thing I'm surprised about is Forrest are down a man. Why not? Why not risk it a little bit? Why not play Jackson and Cuckoo together? I was a bit surprised they took Jackson off to bring in Cuckoo on. They brought Yao Felix on as well. Yao Felix is he can do a lot of stuff with the ball, but he again, it's not like for like. So and then with Forrest, they can show they can play different ways. You want to yuck it up. You've got Anderson, Yates, and company to do a job, or James Ward-Prowse. You want pace and directness. You've got Morgan Gibbs-White and Hudson Odoi and Alanga. It was funny to see Hudson Odoi and on one side and Jaden Sancho on the other because it was kind of like for like a little bit there. Hudson Odoi being a former Chelsea player, and then you need someone to come on and do something from the bench. You got Joe Da Silva, that is kind of starting to emerge a little bit. And then striker wise, you got Chris Wood or Iwani. There's a lot of ways for this Forest team to play, and Nottingham Forest could be a darling story this year under Nuno Espirito Santo. Uh, there's always someone that makes that jump. There's always someone that everyone picks to struggle that ends up kind of shocking and maybe threatens Europe. Fulham could maybe be that team as well. Uh, I was thinking it would maybe be Ipswich to start the season. That's not looking likely. But last year it was Bournemouth and Crystal Palace. Uh, the way that they have some depth. I mean, defensively they're incredibly good as well. The expected the XG conceded is like 3 or 4 in the table. They're and it's not like they're just sitting back all the time. Now, yes, they're not the most pleasing on the eye as far as passes and whatnot. They're very direct and they're very good at creating chances with the kind of possession that they get. And they're one of those teams. It's a throwback team to be honest, because it doesn't matter how much possession. If even if a team has 80 to 20, a Forest are really good at getting the ball wide. And if it's if you're not going to have if the to take someone on 1v1 is not going to be there. If eventually you just get bored and you just float something into the box, Chris Wood's good in the air, and he's a pain. And they're very good with their accuracy and their crosses. So there's a lot to really like about this Forest team. I think I've already said that before. And then I think I'll end with West Ham and Ipswich. I mean, the Man United case, there really wasn't a ton of talk about that game. So we'll do there. Then Leicester and I don't know how many games are left after that. Yep, the Leicester win with scoring a goal thanks to Facundo Brunete, and then they're able to just kind of hold on with Bournemouth. And then Newcastle and Everton. The story going into that game was Anthony Gordon, and Anthony Gordon really did play a story into that game where Everton were able to get or Newcastle were able to get a penalty. He took it the way that he was like breathing. Maybe he shouldn't have. And the other thing too is you're going to it's against a keeper that probably knows you pretty well that you've probably taken PKs before in practice. Pickford also has that little cheat code water bottle. Pickford guesses right. He also guesses really early, and that's where Gordon is looking down. Pickford maybe knew that he could guess early. Gordon had just made a PK going the opposite way versus Man City. So maybe that was kind of in his head, and he tried to go. He didn't try to copy himself. He tried to just kind of get Pickford cheating a little bit, and it just didn't work. That game was end to end. It was chaotic. There was no control on it, and there was no kind of there was no quality really to it. So there's not really ton to talk about there. I will talk a little bit with West Ham and Ipswich, and then probably close off where we get 4-1. Antonio in the first minute, so little Brentford kind of you play Brentford, maybe you learn a little something about scoring early. It also is Ipswich fault because Calvin Phillips plays a giant role into this, and the funny thing about this is that two of Ipswich's worst players were players that were on West Ham last season in Calvin Phillips and Ben Johnson. Get to that a little bit later. But it gets to 1-1 with a really nice goal again by Liam Delap. But after that, West Ham did not look back. 2-1 with Kudus. I think uh, I think it's Emerson is able to get free, and he has a cross in the box. He's trying to find Mikel Antonio. Antonio does just enough to get something on the ball. The ball just kind of floats. I think it hits the crossbar, and then Kudus is there for the rebound. And then Bowen. So it's 2-1 going into halftime, and then Bowen makes it 3-1. That really does kill the game. And this comes really from Ipswich trying to pass back to Murch, and the commentators were going at Murch. I feel like that's kind of a little bit unfair. But what happens is the ball it gets to Ben Johnson, and he instead of like hitting something on the ground, he boots it essentially, and the ground there's the you can see it's in the sun, and the ball is coming high, and Murch doesn't have a ton to he doesn't have, like, many ways to not mess up here, essentially, and, he tries to collect it, and the touch is a little heavy, and Tony does well to sprint and also, create some of that danger as well, and, but there's still a lot to do here. Ipswich are somewhat in position, but it's Calvin Phillips, and basically, Bowen just kind of figures he can get Calvin Phillips off balance, he does, and then drops a shoulder, cuts inside, and then he's able to find the net. That really did kill the game, and then Paqueta made it 4-1 as well. West Ham were very good. Ipswich were not. This is the first game where kind of Kieran McKenna have a little bit of a wake up call. You off that pretty good result last week versus Aston Villa, riding high with that point, scoring 2 goals, making Aston Villa kind of pedestrian a little bit offensively. And here, a lot of this was kind of you playing into mistakes yourself, but also couldn't do anything to really stop West Ham, and West Ham needed a response after this. After pretty disappointing performance for Liverpool, really bad with Chelsea, and then didn't really do that great versus Brentford, despite getting a draw. Also, what happened with Brentford last week was a little of a confrontation apparently between Mo Kudus and Julian Lopetegui, and so would we finally see a response? Would we see a different West Ham? And we did. But the other thing we see is we see a different lineup. We see Aaron Wan-Bissaka, John Claude Tadibo, Max Kelman, and Emerson. So we don't see Mavropanos. We don't see whoever else was tried there. So we see Tadibo actually get a start. And there was a moment in this first half where it looked like Liam Delap was actually going to get in behind, and Tadibo is able to brush him off, or at least shoulder to shoulder. It's not called a PK. Uh, but you finally have someone that can play higher up. You have someone that can be aggressive, and he showed he can be very good with his feet. West Ham were better at being able to just pass from the back a little bit, and to get things going that way. But we also see Rodriguez, kind of kind of the main CDM. Nope, Edson Alvarez here, and Rodriguez maybe is better on the ball. Rodriguez has been quite good for them as well, and then Thomas Suchek. Thomas Suchek and Mikel Antonio, 2 players that always each no matter who is managing, no matter if it's the same coach, because Moyes was doing this too. Each year, a coach tries to not play these two, and each year they end up, no matter what, finding themselves back into the starting 11 one way or the other. And Suchek is a big body, and he's there to contest those long balls in the air. Paqueta, tried a little bit more in the middle, and then Kudus Bowen, and then Antonio. And this was, West Ham were able to go long. They were also able to play through Ipswich, kind of pressing them as well. And they created something like 25 plus looks. Ipswich were really bad. Uh, the other thing, kind of looking at the Ipswich lineup, no Axel Twanzubi. So we see Ben Johnson get a start instead. I don't necessarily know if how much that really did cause us, though. The goal that kind of kills it was making it 3-1, and so that did come from Johnson's mistake. But also, Calvin Phillips is getting played, and this was the first game where he really did look out of place. I don't know if he was nervous playing against West Ham or not, but he just the first touch in the game, he gives it a ball, he gives the ball away, and then he seemed off it. I can't really explain it. Morrissey wasn't really great either. before this, Kajus was playing in some of these games, so I don't really know if that's necessarily something to think about. Also, Burns was played instead of Ogbeni. It was just an off day for Ipswich and Kieran McKenna. Uh, like I said, West Ham with 23 shots and 11 on target, 9 big chances, and this is not a West Ham team that has been flying. Murridge had to make 9 saves. Now, Murridge made a mistake a little bit for the Howler, but he still had to make 9 saves. West Ham with a bigger passing number than we normally see, 432. 53% possession. West Ham don't always like having the ball. This was the first time where I can say this was maybe a different West Ham than we saw last season with David Moyes. Now it's only one game, and they have maybe better players, better center backs. I really did like what I saw from Tadibo, and Kilman is very good with his feet. Uh, it's only one game, but they needed a response and they got it. The other thing I saw was West Ham were high pressing. It didn't feel like they at all were uh, respectful of Ipswich. They were high pressing, and then you've got Liam Delap that can run in behind, that can do what Chelsea's Jackson was doing, and they were trying it. But again, the inserts of the emergence of Tadibo was different. And you also have Wan-Bissaka, who's always very good defensively as well. And I think Wan-Bissaka actually looks better with the ball at his feet so far. So just it, there's a lot to really like, at least what we saw um, here. The other thing to talk about is Paqueta's role. He's the focal point in the early phase, but also when he's getting the ball, he's combining with Bowen with the one-two touches. There was a lot to really like in this game. Bowen back to his best as well. Uh, and maybe it helped a little bit that he was up against, but I think the other thing too is it helps that Jared Bowen, that Miguel Antonio is back to just be a pest into the box. And I noticed that when they played Liverpool, it just West Ham were better when you got the big man in the box. If nothing else, float something in. Maybe he can cause some chaos. He's very good at just being a pest. That is the best way to describe him. But also got some quality to himself too. He's also really good at holding up to the ball as well. And just again, there was a lot to like here. This is the first time where you don't feel like West Ham will actually be in trouble. Hopefully we'll see if they can grow on this with Lopetegui as well, and then with the opposite with Ipswich. Lots of alarms here because it was just so easy for West Ham to get in behind and create a number of looks. And then we get to a couple of nil-nils. Like I mentioned, not a ton to really focus on. See how we're doing for time. Uh, Man United and Aston Villa, there was a lot of promise, coming into this game. You felt like Man United needed a response. They you felt like they needed a response in the midweek as well, and they were leading 2-0, and then all of a sudden you look and they're actually down 3-2 to Porto, and then Harry Maguire came on and actually saved it to make it 3-3. So that maybe saved Ten Hag's job. Bruno actually got sent off in that game too. So two games back to back where Bruno got sent off. It did feel like the pressure was really on, and if nothing else, would we see a different kind of Man United team? I'm going to argue we did. Now I don't know if that necessarily is enough to sustainable, but I'm going to argue that this was different. So that at least that's why Aston Villa weren't nearly as able to create nearly that much. Funny enough, uh, Emi Martinez was the more busy keeper than Onana. And with Villa, you didn't get the result versus Ipswich, but at the same time, you had the midweek, you beat Bayern Munich. And what a statement that was! What a fun moment that was for everyone at the ground. John Duran coming off the bench. Maybe there was a hangover. I don't really know. Villa were a little bit off. Villa didn't have Onana. You feel like Onana would have destroyed Christian Eriksen and Kobe Mano in midfield. It was a little bit different. It was Barkley and Tielemans. Uh, not nearly the physical monsters, either of them. Both are very good with the ball at their feet. But just Aston Villa weren't really able to press Man United into mistake after mistake like we had seen the week before with Spurs, and so I think that kind of helped out a little bit. John McGinn. It feels like Aston Villa is a little bit different without John McGinn as well, but also Philogene. They gave the youngster a start, and maybe it was a little bit too early for him. He had a moment to actually win it at the very end, and it was a very good block by Diego Dallo That's the other thing too. I went out a little bit at Dallo last week. Dallo and Evans were kind of key, co-man of the match. Dallo was much better defensively. There was also a moment in the second half when it looks like Matty Cash got free, had a free cross. Looks like Ollie Watkins was going to get the better of Lindelof and Delict, and instead, Dallo was able to just block that with his header, being in good positions. It didn't feel like Dallo was beaten nearly enough or nearly as much as we had seen. So really good way for Diego Dallo to bounce back. And you look at this lineup. It's Maguire and Evans starting the game, and Maguire had to go off, and Delict came on, and it's Delict and Johnny Evans. And you think Ollie Watkins with that kind of pace, or if Watkins is going to be able to occupy them, it's gonna be really easy for Morgan Rogers to be able to get in behind Kobe Mano and Eriksson and exploit that. And Villa were able to do that time and time again. And it's just unfortunately for them, uh, Morgan Rogers wasn't able to make the right decisions, and they weren't able to really get Ollie Watkins nearly going at Evans or McGuire or Delict nearly enough. And then on the flip side, it never really felt like, Mazraoui started and had to go off, and then, Lindelof came on, and he's the right back, and just this Man United back line was completely shuffled, it was completely put together with glue, and Villa weren't really able to create a whole lot. I So it was a bit of a surprise, but I think the other thing you see here is Man United were not pressing like crazy. They actually set up to be very, very sound defensively. Rest defense, I think, is what they call it, where they set up in a block. They set up to be very, very narrow. Rashford and Garnacho were not, playing out wide. They were very tight. There wasn't really a whole lot of space for Aston Villa to really operate in. And the other thing too is there wasn't really a lot of space to run in behind because of how deep Evans and Maguire were kind of starting. Now again, that was leading a little of a gap for to get the ball into Morgan Rogers, but when Rogers was turning, Watkins doesn't. There's not really an option for him. For Watkins, there's not really options elsewhere. So Morgan Rogers has to basically do a little hero act 1v1. He just wasn't able to do it. So it was clever setup by Ten Hag. Um, the other thing too is by not you can do that by not pressing. You know, Hoyland and Bruno, or sometimes with Ericsson, they were just again just kind of sitting off. And I feel like going forward, fans aren't going to like that. I don't know if you can do this at Old Trafford without getting a lot of boos. It's probably the best way for this team to play. Set up like you're an old kind of a mid-table side that's just trying to scam a couple of results together, try to make things ugly. And you've got pace in Garnacho and Rashford to go for, or even Hoyland when he's playing. If you need that, you can try to be a team that has 35% of the ball, 40% possession, and just that tries to hit off the break over and over again. Because this team can't. I don't think they can play any other way until they get. I mentioned it last week, until they get Lenny Euro in, and then we'll see if they can go back to trying to be a high pressing side. Uh, but hey, this was all about getting a result. The only thing that mattered, not really performance. The performance out of possession was much better, so the draw was fitting. Aston Villa with 11 shots and only one on target. So Villa did struggle a lot to create. So touches in the penalty area, 25 for Aston Villa. That's not, that's that's a lot more. It's double what Man United had in 11, but it's still, you normally see that number being a lot higher when a team is sitting back like this. Aston Villa only had 54% possession as well, despite Man United sitting off them. So that is, there's a lot to celebrate here. Ten Hag's enough to survive. Ericsson is trusted again. He's been in and out of the side as well. I don't really know if Kobe Mano is the best player to play with him, but it feels like they're going to baby Ugarte, coming into this. But Man United, we're not. I can't say this. They're not turning the ball over nearly as much. It just helps. It helps with build up. He's going to show for it. He's going to make good decisions on the ball. A couple of times when Bruno was doing some Hollywood stuff, he was losing the ball, and that was kind of bad. But for the most part, Man United were more secure in what they were trying to do. And again, like I said, Aston Villa were not able to turn them over and create moments to get Ollie Watkins free. When John Duran came on, they weren't able to really find him much. Uh, you know, I, Diego Dallo has been a big topic of conversation where you feel like he's been kind of the weak point. At least that's what I said last week, and it didn't feel like many attacks went down his way. And when they did, actually he was there to defend and to stop them. So good for him. And then again, no Lindelof on the other side, not really who you would think about for right back. And Villa weren't really able to go at him much either. And they were trying to, but it just wasn't really happening. The other thing to talk about was Rashford had to go off again. He didn't like coming off, but he got a cheap foul and avoided another cheap kind of second yellow card, and was taken off at halftime. So he's not necessarily been able to get going, but he was also he was he was the one player that was quite lively, at least for Man United. He was forcing Amy Martinez to make some of those saves. You don't really remember Rasmus or Xerxes getting involved much. Uh, so again, it's not a clean sheet is a clean sheet. They still are struggling to put both things together. They're still struggling to create a whole lot offensively. The midfield was still outrun, but that's probably what you expect. Uh, and again, if without repeating myself week in and week out, the structure is broken the way that they were playing. This at least gives you an idea of what they can do if they do stick with this mid to low block approach, where there's less pressing up front. You try to pack the middle a little bit more. You make teams try to play through you. You have less distance to cover. Um, Johnny Evans was quite good when he didn't have to play in a lot of space. He actually had time to anticipate more in the box. The Ligt is kind of that kind of defender as well. You're going to allow more teams to have more possession, probably more looks towards your box, but it's probably the way to go until you get other people in. Uh, and then with Villa, I was a bit surprised we didn't see more Leon Bailey and Matty Cash doing some overlaps. Uh, to maybe go at Dallo a little bit. The one thing to say is maybe they were a little scared because what happened where they started the game and Enzo Conza had to go off, so they brought in Diego Carlos. Maybe Carlos isn't as good on the transition. Maybe so. Matty Cash was actually playing a little bit further back than necessarily going forward nearly as much. You didn't really see him doing much of overlapping. There was a few times, but it wasn't nearly enough. And then Philogene Bedance as well. No Jacob Ramsey, no Leon Bailey went off, no Jacob Ramsey, no John McGinn. So it's not the end of the world, but Villa fans probably would have thought coming into this was probably the time to really go at Man United, probably a wounded animal, and Man United were able to survive, and Ten Hag is able to survive because of that. And then with Everton and Newcastle, like I said, the story coming into this was Gordon, and the story after it is Gordon, unfortunately for him. Otherwise, actually played a pretty good game, but it is the missed PK that does matter. And had the PK actually gone in, the way that both teams, there was space everywhere for both teams to attack. Both teams were trying to press and win the ball back. Both teams weren't really sitting back. There was, if a goal had actually early goal had happened, maybe we could have actually, gotten a pretty good game to break out here. But it's just there was a lot of a lack of quality when both teams were getting pretty good looks. So I don't know, maybe not. Uh, Everton are going to be happy about this because they had Jared Brathwaite back last week, and then no Brathwaite this game. A bit of a concern going forward if he has suffered a bit of a setback because Michael Keane isn't necessarily good enough, and Tarkowski is the one that gave up a really stupid PK. Uh, so Newcastle as well, we're missing some guys. This game probably doesn't end 0-0 if Alexander Isak is playing. Let's just put it that way. So, and Eddie Howe, when he has to make some changes, coming off the bench, like I've ever mentioned that before, he doesn't have the game changers really that he would probably like. So, uh, 0-0 is probably what we deserve. To be honest, there was the other thing to talk about was Everton didn't score with Decore, but it was offsides. But nice little link up between Decore and Calvert Lewin. So that was nice to see. Decore is playing a little bit deeper, but he can also make those runs when they're timed. Uh, but other than that, this was it it wasn't really that great. I mean, 8 shots for Everton, 2 on target. Newcastle with 14, only 3 on target. That kind of says it all. Touches in the penalty area was Newcastle 42 to Everton 13. Everton were outplayed. To that is easy to say. Newcastle with over 2 xG. Jordan Pickford had to make some pretty big saves, and he did. But it is it's not the worst result for Newcastle to start the season. It does feel like get Ishak back, this looks entirely different. I think Gordon is better when he's played on the wing than playing through the middle. He was able to create some pretty good looks for them, but it's just not nearly enough. But we'll see what this team is like with Newcastle. Also, you know, Newcastle's another team too. Each kind of week is the same. Sam Byrne with Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Dominic Calvert-Lewin nearly did cause a PK himself, and he was able to get Sam Byrne was able to get away. Dan Byrne was able to get away at the very end. Otherwise, Everton could have maybe picked this off to get started with Everton. I was a little bit surprised we didn't see Deshaun Dyche kind of do a little bit more, but you see how bare the cupboard is as far as attacking options to kind of change a game when things aren't really going his way. I was a bit surprised we didn't see more Lindstrom. Come on, get some minutes. To be honest, instead he brought on Irabanam, kind of a defensive minded midfielder. He brought on Idrissa Gueye to maybe see the game out, but he didn't. 12 minutes to go. Why not throw in an attacker instead, or try Beto. Newcastle playing Dan Burn. Why not give Beto and Calvert Lewin kind of a two-man action in the final 10ish minutes? Bit surprised there, but it's all about survival, and you get a point. No Braithwaite. Very bad Tarkowski foul. You're able to survive that. So you got Pickford. That's always positive too. And the main thing is getting the clean sheet and not dropping points. You drop points in the second half. First Bournemouth versus Villa. I think in Leicester City as well. And on the back of the win last week versus Palace, here you get 4 points over the two games. It's not the end of the world. And then Leicester and Bournemouth. You finally have a primitive side that does win. It is Leicester City with a great goal from Facunde Bernete. One of those cases where again you just needed someone to step in with some quality, and it is some quality. And even before that, he was creating a little of a warning sign. There was a moment before the goal where Bernete had a nice little carry, gets through a few players, gets near the box, has a pop, pretty decent save by Kappa, and then he scores by after a give and go with James Justin. No one in Bournemouth follows Bernete's one, but there's still a lot to do here. Then he does a very clever little fake to go around Senese, just gets him going the wrong way. Gets it onto his left foot and then just roofs it. Kappa can't clear it, keep it out. And the little Brighton player is doing some nice things for Leicester City, and that is what they needed because Bournemouth had 19 shots, only 2 on target. Leicester had 6 shots and 2 on target. So this game was crying out for some quality. Bournemouth created more than enough looks to actually do to change this around, and just unlucky for Bournemouth. Probably their best looks came from some set pieces, and they scored, but it was offsides. They scored again, and I think that was ruled or they nearly scored, and that was ruled offsides too. They were getting close, but so Leicester were living dangerously, but it doesn't matter because they are able to win nonetheless. So Bournemouth a little bit frustrating probably for Areola. Loads of chances, only 2 on target. It wasn't necessarily like Evan Nielsen was the reason for that. But also you can see the early goal. Leicester then don't have to really care about playing possession. They're sitting back deep, so you have to break them down. I did feel like the sub that to bring on Sinistera, finally have someone to take on James Dustin to beat him 1v1 to help you out, and they created a bunch of goals that way, a bunch of chances that way. So not the end of the world there, and that is probably where we end off. And to see how we're doing for time, it could be worse, it could be better. So, anyways, thank you for tuning in, and until then, oops, and until then, you stay squatted and stop recording.